Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Ardis. This is the Dr. Ardis Show, and this presentation is called The N-Word. Actually, it's called The Other N-Word. And the reason why we titled that is because there's a certain word that circulates throughout the American society for my entire life that seems to be taboo and be very polarizing and creates a lot of emotional upset. And then in other cases, it seems to be very exciting for people to profess this in various kind of songs, particularly rap songs. So for some reason, there's this weird feeling surrounding one N word. And I have found in the last few years that there's another N word that makes medical professionals and citizens alike very uncomfortable. So I called this the other N word. This is actually a presentation I did at a presentation in Los Angeles. However, I realized, and my team brought this to my awareness recently, that I never actually took my own audiences through this presentation, nor was I able to complete the entire presentation from the stage in Los Angeles. So I'm going to present the entire presentation in its entirety right here. And as we go along, of course, as usual, you're going to hear my thoughts and impressions and opinions on the topic. All right, so this is going to be a fluid, straight through presentation. Usually there's sponsors for my show. The sponsors for this show is going to be thedrartisshow.com. And what am I going to tell you sponsoring this? Foreign Protein Cleanse at the Dr. Ardis Show, which is this product here. Foreign Protein Cleanse. And EDTA at the Dr. Ardis Show. And at the Dr. Ardis Show, you can also find that we now carry Global Healing's Bioactive Copper. So those three products are going to be what is sponsoring this entire presentation. All right, so let's dive right in. This is The Other N-Word by Dr. Brian Ardis. All right, this is Mark Twain and a famous quote of his. He says, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled." I've actually loved this quote from the beginning of the pandemic. I've seen it many places. Mark Twain says, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled." All right, this is a picture of the 7 top CEOs of the major tobacco corporations in the United States. If you look at the top left, you'll see this is dated April 14th, 1994. CEOs of 7 major tobacco corporations in the United States swear under oath that nicotine is not addictive. So our Congress in 1994 asked all the heads of every tobacco giant to come in and swear under oath, committing perjury possibly if they were lying, that nicotine is not addictive. And what did they do? Well, let's see. Here's the actual 20-something second clip of them saying whatever it is they're professing to believe.
Consider yourself to be under oath. We just would like to have this for the record. I don't believe that nicotine for our products are addictive. I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive. I believe that nicotine is not addictive. And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
All right, so after all 7 CEOs of the tobacco giants testify under oath with threat of perjury and going to prison, the FDA panel decides, after hearing in Congress all the CEO heads testify under oath that nicotine is not addictive and that they believed it was not addictive, the FDA decides in August to announce that an FDA panel has been put together and they say nicotine is addictive. And this was a unanimous vote by the FDA. And so from this point in 1994, you have seen this label everywhere around America. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical with any product ever that has nicotine in it. Now, nicotine is the other N-word I'm referencing in this presentation. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Every one of you have seen it. I've seen it everywhere on every tobacco product ever. I've seen it. So have you. This guy, his name, we will reveal in just a minute. I'm not sure if you guys recognize who he is, but pay close attention to this guy, because this guy is going to be involved very much so in this presentation based on a statement he is heavily quoted to have had said in the mid 1900s. Here's a picture of him again, very passionate about something. Here he is again. He's the guy on the right hanging out with Adolf Hitler. You're right, that is Adolf Hitler. Him and Adolf Hitler were big time buddies. This guy's name is Joseph Goebbels. He lived from 1897 to 1945. You can see his Nazi swastika. You can see him and his family with Adolf Hitler. I believe that's Adolf Hitler's family, maybe, and Joseph Goebbels himself. I really don't know who's all in that picture. I just wanted y'all to see he's a buddy of Adolf Hitler. All right, now Joseph Goebbels is credited with this quote: "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it." Now we're going to focus on this beginning of this quote. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Joseph Goebbels is credited with being the father of propaganda, and his words, his efforts in the media to lie to all of Europe and Germany particularly is what is credited with all of the families backing Adolf Hitler's and his Third Reich regime in trying to destroy all of humanity and his eugenics Jew program. All right, so the beginning of this statement we're going to focus on, but let me just go ahead and read the whole quote. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state or the government can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. Joseph Goebbels. We're going to focus on the very first statement. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Here's the lie. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. And this lie has been big, and they have kept repeating it every day all across the world ever since 1994. And guess what has happened? People have eventually come to believe it. All right, so where do we see this lie being repeated all the time? Oh, we see it on billboards. You'll read there, here's some vaping product that has nicotine in it. What's the phrase? Nicotine is addictive. Also on these Juul cartridges for vaping products, warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Here's another Juul product or another vaping product. This product contains tobacco-free nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. How about these nicotine products? Little cartridges of suckets or pouches of nicotine. Nicotine, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. We see this everywhere. Here's another one. This product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. If you ever want to know why it is you believe nicotine is addictive, this is why, because they keep telling you it is. All right, so here's another one. You'll see the warning over there. Nicotine is highly addictive, says Health Canada on this label. Here's Superman. He even says, Nicotine. Never say yes to a cigarette. All right, so it's everywhere, man. It's in comic books, cartoons, billboards, you name it. So this is since 1994. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. And this goes for all lies that are big and constantly repeated. And man, were there many. I can think of one over the last 4 years, by the way. COVID-19 is caused by a bat virus. Bat virus, bat virus, bat virus, bat virus, bat virus. You want to know why so many people believe it's a bat virus? Do you want to know why so many believe it's respiratory? Because they keep lying to you and telling a big lie, and they keep repeating it over and over and over. It doesn't matter what the lie is. If you keep repeating it, you keep seeing it, you're going to believe it. All right, so I'm going to show you how often they have repeated this, not only in mainstream media, but even in scientific medical journals. Ready? Here we go. This is the British Medical Journal. 1994, the same year that all the heads of the tobacco agencies stood in front of Congress and under oath swore that nicotine is not addictive. The same year, the FDA comes out and says it is addictive. Then the British Medical Journal says, look at this article, nicotine is addictive. Okay, so this says advisory panel in the US. That's the FDA, by the way. Now we're going to read just highlighted quotes on every screen I show. You'll see a red underlined, sentenced, or a boxed information. And that's all I really need y'all to focus on. Remember, you can go back and look at this PowerPoint presentation in its entirety and download it and dissect it and read it all you want to. In fact, every slide that has a referenced article will have the accompanying web address that you can type in and go read the whole study. I'm not lying to you, nor am I trying to like persuade you to believe something that's not true. But you can go back and read all that stuff. All right, so here we go. The sentence in this British Medical Journal reads, the U.S. took a step closer to regulating cigarettes last week when an advisory panel of the FDA said that nicotine is addictive. And then this is 1995. This is APA PsycNet, looking blue, highlighted and underlined in red, the scientific case that nicotine is in fact addictive. Evidence of nicotine's addictiveness resides in the tendency of the smoking habit. So the evidence of their stating here, the evidence that nicotine is addictive is because smoking habits appear to be addictive habits. 80% of people who initially quit smoking relapse by the end of a year. Well, I don't know if y'all have ever considered this statement or ever seen this statement, but how many people of you know people who are addicted to cocaine but can actually avoid it and not do it for a whole year and then a year later do it again? I don't know about y'all, but I've had donuts that have sugar in it that supposedly is addictive and not eating another donut for years. Does that mean I'm addicted to the donut because I ate it again 2 years later? How about potato chips, which had addictive chemicals added to them? Because I avoid them for years and then go to a party and eat them again, does that mean I'm only eating it because there's something in it addictive? That's so weird. All right. Anyway, I find that odd. All right, now this is a New Scientist article from March of 1996, the very next year. You'll see at the top, you'll see the years in order. I'm going to give you the years in order from 1994 till now of how often you've been lied to, how often this lie keeps being repeated. All right, so this is an article, New Scientist, March 1996, tobacco giant knew nicotine was addictive. This is the Journal of Pediatrics, April 1997. Nicotine addiction, a pediatric disease. Did y'all know that children are addicted to nicotine? Oh my God, what are they using? I didn't know so many children were smoking. so dumb. All right, let's keep going. 1998, it's published in Nature Medicine. Nicotine addiction and the lure of reward. All right, so they're just hammering away. Let's get to 1999. Tobacco use as a drug addiction, the Scientific Foundation. This is in PubMed on National Institutes of Health's Library of Medicine. And in this article, they actually state in the very beginning of the summary, nicotine is an addictive drug. All right, rocking. ABC News reports in September of the year 2000, study, nicotine addiction can be immediate. Wow, it's like as bad as heroin. I had no idea. This is the year 2001, the very next year. And then the medical journal Pharmacology, Biochemistry, and Behavior, they wrote this article and published it. Cellular Mechanisms of Nicotine Addiction. This is the Journal of Dental Education the very next year, September 2002, Managing Nicotine Addiction. This is Science News, September 2003, the very next year. Early nicotine use may lead to lasting addiction, study finds. Of course they did. Then CBS News in 2004 is jumping in on the action. Nicotine addiction molecule IDE. That means they have figured out what it is in nicotine that makes it addictive. And then Yale News. Let's get the University of Yale in there. Yale in 2005 writes an article, Research Explores Nicotine Addiction. Then the University of California, San Francisco, the same university that has the video of the 7 tobacco giants testifying under oath in front of Congress that nicotine is not addictive. They published this in 2006. Smokers invited to test vaccine against nicotine addiction. Oh my God, did y'all know in 2006 they were investigating a vaccine for nicotine addiction? I think they should come out with a vaccine for liars. The New York Times reports in 2007, nicotine addiction is quick in youths, research finds. A young cigarette smoker, they say in New York Times, can begin to feel powerful desires for nicotine within 2 days of first inhaling, a new study has found. Ooh. The American Journal of Psychiatry, they published in September of 2008. The whole entire article is titled Nicotine Addiction. NBC News jumps in the trend, 2009, February. A jury finds nicotine addiction caused smoker's death. Wow, interesting. Even the Journal of Social Issues publishes in the year 2010 a published article titled Nicotine Addiction, Implication for Health Policy. National Public Radio in 2011 publishes this article, Addiction Inc., Big Tobacco Keeping Us Hooked. Uric Alert publishes a study in 2012, or an article titled New Vaccine for Nicotine Addiction, 6 years after the other nicotine vaccine was published about. This is how moronic. If y'all believe a vaccine needs to be given to us to beat nicotine addiction, I'd like to know why they don't have an opioid vaccine yet or a fentanyl vaccine yet. Interesting. 2012. In Nature magazine in 2013, it's published Nicotine Exposure Gives Baby Rats Addictive Personalities. Results suggest explanation for why people exposed to nicotine in the womb are more likely to become smokers. What a load of crap. All right, Virginia Tech news. Published in 2015, there's a vaccination for nicotine addiction being developed with the National Institutes of Health grant. Oh, thank you, NIH, for looking out for us. Y'all are so kind. 2014. Business Insider reports in their article in 2015. This is the title by Jessica Orwig. The way nicotine interacts with our brains to get us hooked is terrifying. AAP News, December 2016. Titled article, Perfect Storm Can Spur Nicotine Addiction in Youth. The Washington Post in 2017. Can you believe I'm doing this in annual order every year? I just picked an article that I found that was unique and from different sources just to show you how much this has been repeated over the last 30 years. Washington Post reports FDA aims to lower nicotine in cigarettes to get smokers to quit. Well, that wouldn't have worked. You're going to learn why in this presentation. And now the FDA gets in on the action. In the same year, as you see up there, 2018, retailers on the FDA's website, retailers, a chart of required warning statements on tobacco products, packaging, and advertising. This is when the FDA was like, it is time to get a handle on this. It's time to make it very clear what the warning labels surrounding nicotine in tobacco products must include on the outside of the packaging for all Americans to read. All right, so in the document, they state cigarette tobacco must display the warning on the two principal display panels, and that warning has to say, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Man, do they want you to know this. Then for roll your own tobacco products, those also must display the warning on the two principal display panels that read, warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Cigars must include this warning, warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. Then we go to 2019. This is an official website of the state of North Carolina, April 2019. Growing number of North Carolina teens at risk of addiction to nicotine, study finds. Penn State Health gets in on the action in 2020, the very beginning of COVID. Light smokers may not escape nicotine addiction, study reveals. Well, you're going to find out why in this presentation that is true. And it has nothing to do with nicotine. Harvard Health Publishing in 2021 writes an article titled Nicotine Addiction Explained and How Medications Can Help. Of course, there's a drug for people addicted to nicotine. Boston University School of Public Health reports in 2022, we worry about kids developing lifelong addiction to nicotine. In this article, I just wanted to show you guys it is in 2022, highlighted there. Then in 2023, The Guardian publishes this article. Children so addicted to nicotine, they sleep with vapes under pillow. Australian hearing told. After repeating to the world for almost 20 years that nicotine is addictive, actually almost 30 years now, did the FDA change its view in 2022? Let's find out. This is an article posted in, you can see on the right-hand side, June of 2022. Nicotine is why tobacco products are addictive. I guess they haven't changed their tune. All right, so why is the FDA so certain that nicotine is what makes tobacco products addictive? And why on earth did they come out in 2022 and make sure it was published that inside of tobacco products, there is only one thing responsible for your addiction to tobacco products. And why are they declaring they still believe it is nicotine? I'd like to ask you, is nicotine addictive? Remember what Mark Twain said. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Now, going back and looking at this quote in this image, I just had to bring to your attention. Notice anything ironic in this image? It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Notice what he's holding in his left hand. A cigarette made from tobacco. I find this not ironic. I think this is amazing. I do not think they put Mark Twain's image into this quote with him holding a cigarette for you to know this is what they're fooling you about. However, the irony cannot be overlooked. All right, so is nicotine addictive? This is an article from 2002, just 8 short years after FDA comes out, after listening to the CEOs of tobacco giants testify under oath that nicotine is not addictive. The FDA still declares a few months later it absolutely is addictive. And then almost 30 years later, they're still telling you tobacco products are only addictive because of nicotine. All right, so in 2002, 8 years after the FDA lies to everybody, there is this article written by, and it's found in Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist stuff, or on their publication. A news release. Is nicotine addictive? Israeli scientist challenges the findings. Now I want to dive into this for everybody. Since the 1988 report of the Surgeon General, the statement that nicotine is as addictive as heroin and cocaine, that cigarettes are efficient nicotine devices delivering hits to the brain within seconds, have become truisms like the statement that water is wet. These statements have largely gone unchallenged. Frank argues, I quote, a critical evaluation of the evidence that the Surgeon General mustered for his conclusions and the evidence that has been accumulating since shows that this evidence is extremely weak and certainly not compelling. In fact, many better controlled studies show that nicotine is aversive both to animals and humans and limits cigarette smoking rather than maintains it. Did you guys know that animals and humans, when they're given nicotine, will actually push it away? They don't even want it. And in animal studies, they've actually put nicotine in water and then gave them regular water. And the animals actually always resisted the nicotine water and would always go to regular water and avoid foods that nicotine was put inside of. Did you know that nicotine was actually proven to be more aversive to both humans and animals in research studies? Oh, well, this is from 2015. And this is in Medical Daily News. Actually, that's not the actual publication. This is just an online publication. I just want to read the title. Nicotine alone does not lead to addiction. This is in 2015. Additives found in both light cigarettes and e-cigarettes have been found to be harmful. 2015. Now, hold up. Every label I showed you earlier shows that, in fact, quote, all the actual billboards, advertisements for tobacco or nicotine products, they quote, nicotine alone is an addictive drug. So where in the world did this article come from? So I want to remind you, they don't tell you tobacco products are addictive. They continue to tell you that nicotine alone is addictive. Here it is again. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. 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 Nicotine is an addictive chemical, says Health Canada. Who is claiming in 2015 that nicotine alone does not lead to addiction? Harvard did. This is Harvard University. And for anybody out watching this, I don't know if you're shocked by this, but why would Harvard say this in 2015? Well, I'm going to show you. So in 2015, you'll see on the bottom left-hand side, if you wanted to write into the author of this study or get more information about the study, you had to write into Dr. Hillel R. Alpert at harvard.edu. All right, so he's the lead author on this study. The title of this study from Harvard is A Study of Pyrazines in Cigarettes and How Additives Might Be Used to Enhance Tobacco Addiction. All right, so this is a study of pyrazines, which are chemicals added to cigarettes. And Harvard has a lot of information to give you in this study. Let's read it together. Very first sentence of the paper from Harvard University. Nicotine is known as the drug that is responsible for the addicted behavior of tobacco users, but nicotine has poor reinforcing effects when administered alone. So Harvard's telling you nicotine isn't an addictive substance, especially when you give it to people alone or animals alone. It has very poor addictive qualities. Well, why do all those advertisements since 1994? And why in the world do you think the FDA wants to continue lying to you that nicotine alone is addictive? And in fact, these products like nicotine gum, nicotine patches, nicotine suckets or pouches you can just suck on, like I showed you in the pictures, they don't have any tobacco in it. They only have nicotine in it. So why would they continue to make sure those companies put on their labels nicotine is addictive if nicotine alone, confirmed by scientific journals, is not addictive? What Harvard concluded, you can see in highlight here. Pyrazines, these chemicals, may help to optimize nicotine delivery and dosing and promote addiction through cueing, learned behavior, and or its own direct effects. Pyrazines, these chemicals. And I just want to highlight again, this disclaimer notes this came from Harvard School of Public Health. In the article, pyrazines, there's a section titled Pyrazines and Learned Behavior. Pyrazine stimulation of olfactory receptors. Olfactory receptors are inside your nostrils, at the top of your nostrils by your brain, are these, as an extension of your brain, these nerve outlets called olfactory nerves or bulbs. And this is what your brain uses to smell. So olfactory nerves are the receptors that control the sense of smell at the top of your nostrils as we breathe in. Pyrazine stimulation of olfactory receptors may enhance learned behavior, either by acting alone or in combination with other sensory modality stimulation. And pyrazines can reinforce smoking through associative learning and motivate increased desire or wanting or even unrestrained consumption. Okay, focus on this, man. Can you believe it? Pyrazine stimulation and motivation, increased desire or wanting, or even creates unrestrained consumption. Do you guys know what the definition or a term that defines the phrase unrestrained consumption is? The word is addiction. If you're addicted to something, you will have unrestrained consumption. You cannot stop consuming that product. You are addicted to it. Cocaine users, heroin users, they can't stop. They have unrestrained consumption. You're hearing here from Harvard that pyrazines motivate increased desire or wanting or even unrestrained consumption. Notice they didn't say anything about nicotine. Here is a list in the Harvard study of the 13 different pyrazine pyrazine chemicals that are man-made, that are added to cigarette products to make them addictive and to create this unrestrained consumption. And you see them all: ethylpyrazine, acetylpyrazine, diethylpyrazine, dimethylpyrazine, methoxypyrazine. All there's 13 of them on here. Notice where this came from, by the way. You can see at the bottom. Manufacturers of tobacco, 1994 cigarette ingredients report. And then again in manufacturers 2011 report to the FDA, Philip Morris Incorporated's website, RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company's website. I mean, this is common knowledge. You can go find it. And now I want to continue here. They continue in this journal by Harvard, or this article by Harvard, this research study by Harvard. Pyrazines, a class of chemosensory agents. They're chemically sensory, smell, taste agents, comprise 15 of the 599 compounds or chemicals on the list of cigarette ingredients provided by manufacturers to the United States Department of Health and Human Services in 1994. Pyrazines also comprise 8 of the compounds on the list of additive ingredients provided to manufacturers to the FDA in 2011. And pyrazines represent 10 of the compounds presently listed on cigarette manufacturers' websites as cigarette ingredients. Did you know that cigarettes and the tobacco giants are allowed by the FDA to add 599 compounds to tobacco products? And if you didn't know that, that's almost 600 ingredients allowed to be added to tobacco products. And if that's true, that means they're not just putting tobacco and wrapping it in a piece of paper, calling it a cigarette, or putting tobacco leaf and chopping it up and putting it into a snuff cartridge. That's not what they're doing. They're taking these tobacco plants, chopping them up, and then adding 600 chemicals to them. And I would like to ask you, can you name the 600 chemicals, the 599 of them that are published to be allowed by the FDA to be added to cigarette products? And if you can't name them, can you confidently tell me that tobacco plants by themselves cause lung cancer when there are 599 other chemicals you don't know and you can't name because you've never seen the list and never reviewed it? How can you confidently say that tobacco products cause cancer? How do you know it's not the chemicals added to that cause cancer? There are many chemicals in this world that cause cancer. In fact, they're in most of your cosmetics, for example, and in your food, processed foods particularly. I'm going to continue in Harvard study. The sensory inputs of pyrazine flavor additives might also provide cues for reward-related learned behaviors, and pyrazines could play a critical role in the development, maintenance, and relapse of tobacco dependence. Remember that statement earlier in that article that people who stop smoking often might start smoking at the end of a year, and that relapse is indicative and evidence enough that tobacco products are addictive? Harvard's telling you that pyrazines could be creating this relapse of tobacco dependence. Substantial evidence exists, they say, to suggest that flavor ingredients are used in cigarette starter products, which increase cigarette experimentation and may help establish smoking behaviors that could lead to a lifetime of addiction. Can you think of a cigarette starter product? I mean, this isn't a little bit of evidence. Harvard is saying substantial evidence exists to suggest that flavor ingredients called pyrazines are used in cigarette starter products to increase cigarette experimentation and may help establish smoking behaviors that could lead to a lifetime of addiction. Well, tobacco snuff would be a cigarette starter product. Vaping products would be a cigarette starter product. And they're telling you that they add flavor agents to these products that are made from pyrazines that establish smoking behaviors and lead to a lifetime of addiction. Notice they did not mention nicotine. In the conclusion area of the paper called the discussion, they write, this is the first report to document the tobacco industry's incorporation of pyrazine compounds into cigarettes since the early 1970s. Do you guys recall that this document, Harvard study, is from the year 2015? That's almost 50 years after the tobacco giant started adding pyrazines to make their tobacco products addictive. They're telling you here, this is the first report to document the tobacco industry's incorporation of pyrazine compounds into cigarettes since the early 1970s. Can you believe the FDA and other labs around the world or scientists have never reported in 50-something years, almost 50 years, about pyrazines added to chemicals, which appear to contribute to the product's appeal and abuse potential? They continue. Does this shock you like it does me? Effects of pyrazines in cigarettes, as described in industry documents, reflect a range of processes by which such non-nicotine constituents might increase tobacco product abuse potential. Notice they said non-nicotine constituents are being added, like pyrazines, to increase tobacco product abuse potential. Several pyrazine derivatives have also been found to potentiate 5-HT binding to receptors in the brain, your central nervous system, which results in enhanced dopamine release independent of nicotine. Do you guys know that the reason why people become addicted to things like sugar, heroin, and cocaine is because of their dopamine release from the central nervous system, your brain? They're telling you here there are several pyrazine derivatives that release dopamine and are independent of doing so from nicotine. Why are they so adamant that nicotine produces the addiction? In the conclusions of their paper, Harvard says, cigarette additives and ingredients with chemosensory effects that promote addiction by acting synergistically with nicotine, also discouraging cessation, discouraging people from stopping, or promoting relapse, should be regulated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. The FDA is only regulating nicotine. What Harvard is saying in 2015 is that the additives like pyrazines that increase addiction and cause addiction, even independent of nicotine, as they say, the FDA should be regulating these ingredients, but they are not. So why do you think you haven't seen any billboards since 1994 telling you to avoid tobacco products because they have pyrazines added to them? Notice no warning label anywhere in America, in public or in private or in a retail store. Never have you read the words on a package of tobacco products. This product contains pyrazines, a highly addictive chemical. Why do you think they're lying to you? Why are they withholding that information? Harvard figured it out in 2015. Want to know how I know that nicotine is not addictive at all? What other plants that are not tobacco contain nicotine? Bell peppers, cauliflower. I mean, you guys do know tobacco is a plant, right? That God created on this earth. These are other plants God created and put on this earth, and they also have nicotine in it. Nicotine is a nutrient, not a deadly chemical. It is a nutrient. And this nutrient is found in bell peppers, cauliflower, zucchini, as you see on the screen. It's also found in every red tomato. It's found in every eggplant. It's found in every green tomato. And it's found in every white potato you've ever eaten. Now, how do I know this? These foods are that, how do I know that nicotine is not addictive? I say this from stages all the time. Have you ever heard a coworker or a friend of yours tell you or your boss or manager that they need an eggplant break in the middle of the afternoon because they ate eggplant at a church function the night before and they haven't been able to get the eggplant out of their mind, and they had this huge dopamine release and they've got to get it again? Have you ever heard any of your coworkers or friends ask for a celery or cauliflower break? You don't see celery on the image on the screen, but celery also has nicotine. And not a soul on earth is addicted to any of these plants at all. In this article on Trendy Digest, they write, "The surprising truth about nicotine in your food." Let's read the first sentence. Did you know that some of the foods you eat every day contain nicotine? Yes, the same addictive substance that is found in cigarettes and tobacco products. But don't worry, you're not going to get hooked on tomatoes or potatoes anytime soon. Do you want to know why? Nicotine's not addictive. Do you know what else is not in these vegetables? Pyrazines, which are man-made chemicals added as flavoring agents to all products that are made with tobacco commercially that aren't organic. This is why you're not going to get addicted to them. This website, haypp.com, they're out of the UK. They write 6 foods you may not have realized contain nicotine. The first one they write is aubergine, aubergine. For every gram of aubergine, there's 100 micrograms of nicotine. If you don't know what that is, aubergine is eggplants. Then they write potatoes. Then they mention tea. They even say some brewed and instant teas, both black and green, contain nicotine with concentrations ranging from 100 to 285 micrograms per gram. Did y'all know that every time you drink green tea, you're drinking nicotine? Tomatoes, cauliflower, green peppers, and the amounts that are in them. Now, this is just a summary I wanted to show you guys. These are the various nanogram per gram amounts of nicotine in all of the vegetables listed here. And then they reference also the studies where they was confirmed these plants have these much nicotine in them. If you've eaten cauliflower, eggplants, potatoes, bell peppers, cauliflower, eggplants, and you're not waking up with sweats in the middle of the night from withdrawals of the nicotine, if you're not at your desk in your cubicle at work and feeling this urge to go to the farmer's market and get more zucchini, cauliflower, and eggplants because you just can't focus, you don't have addiction to nicotine or these plants. Medical News Today reports in 2023 how much nicotine is in one cigarette. A person absorbs 1 to 1.5 milligrams of nicotine from a cigarette stick. You can get more out of a few eggplants, actually. All right. Medical News Today, again in 2019, reported this article. Can dietary nicotine help fight Parkinson's disease? Now, I'm just going to tell you, this article says, can dietary nicotine help fight Parkinson's? And yes, they proved that it can. What is dietary nicotine? It's nicotine that you eat. Well, most people don't eat tobacco products. So what are they talking about? They're talking about vegetables. If you eat vegetables consistently that have high amounts of nicotine, you can help fight off and prevent Parkinson's. Now, this is the point at which most platforms who are showing this presentation are going to sign off. Remember, I'm Dr. Ardis. This is the other N word. You can go to the drardisshow.com right now and continue watching this entire presentation. You're going to be at about minute 45, by the way, in that presentation. Just fast forward to minute 45. We are going to be continuing here. A number of studies suggest that dietary nicotine might have the ability to slow the progress of Parkinson's disease. All right. We're going to go back to Joseph Goebbels' quote. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The next part of his quote is the lie, nicotine is addictive, can be maintained only for such time as the state, insert the FDA or government, can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie. All right, we're going to dive into this one. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state government FDA can shield the people or blind the people from the political reasons for the lie, the economic reasons for the lie, and or the military consequences of this lie. Well, just so you know, the lie that nicotine is an addictive chemical has political, economic, and military consequences. You just aren't familiar with what those are. I'm going to show you. What possible reasons would the state have to want to lie to us every single day for decades about nicotine being addictive and responsible for all cigarette addiction and tobacco addiction when it is obviously not the cause for all the addiction? The state, beginning in 1994, had to create a lie and had to repeat it every single day to shield all people from the looming political, economic, and military consequences of the lie. The state did not tell you that they had been planning something big that would impact global politics, threaten global economies, and would have huge military consequences. They had to shield all people from knowing the plan. They also knew that this diabolical plan had one mortal enemy, nicotine. What was the state planning? A global attack. What was the state planning? This, COVID-19. Now this, remember, they're saying the state. Now look at the top of the slide. You'll see what was the state planning. The state is the government. All right, this is the White House. The White House, which is pretty much the state of the United States. And this is, you'll notice here, this is the Biden-Harris plan to beat COVID-19. That's what this is titled, COVID-19, the Biden-Harris plan. Notice at the top I wrote, what was the state planning? This is directly out of Joseph Goebbels' quote. You have to shield them from their plan. All right, COVID-19, the Biden-Harris plan to beat COVID-19. All right, so this is the same article. The White House, President Biden's administration, September 16th, 2020, quote, "This isn't about politics. It's about saving lives." Oh, really? Well, let's look at what their plan is because it's on the screen. What's the state planning? Plan for the effective, equitable distribution of treatments and vaccines, because development isn't enough if they aren't effectively distributed. What's the state planning? This has been the plan all along since 1994. And Joe Biden tells you, we're going to invest $25 billion in a vaccine manufacturing and distribution plan that will guarantee it gets to every American cost-free. Wow. Why do they love us so much all of a sudden? The next part of the state's planning was to ensure that politics plays no role in determining the safety and efficacy of any vaccine. Oh, really? That's funny. We're going to make sure you don't believe it's political. What was the state planning? The White House of America, the state, was planning to inject every American at no cost with a vaccine, and the state was planning to invest $25 billion to make enough vaccines to inject inside of you. The World Economic Forum in March of 2021 wrote this. This is the state and their worldwide planning, not just American. Notice they're called the World Economic Forum. Remember, Joseph Goebbels said the government or the state has to shield the populace from the political, economic, and military consequences of their lie. The world, it's called the World Economic Forum. The word economics is in their name. And they are telling you, look at the title of their article. What is their plan? Their economic plan. Here's how we can vaccinate the world against COVID-19 is their article. Here's how we, the World Economic Forum, can vaccinate the world. What else was the state planning? Oh, what about the Pope and their Vatican state? Pope Francis says the world needs more vaccines and less war. Remember what Joseph Goebbels said? Joseph Goebbels said the state has to use all its efforts to shield the people from its political, we've already touched on the politics, the White House and Joe Biden and Biden-Harris administration. They have to shield them from the political, economic, I just showed you the World Economic Forum, economic, and they have to shield you from the military consequences of the lie. Oh my God, Pope Francis, 2021 October, is literally calling out the military. The world needs more vaccines and less war. And what did he say? We need to start vaccinating everybody in the world. The world needs more vaccines. And we need to start defunding our militaries around the world and loosening our borders. That is a military consequence of the lie that nicotine is addictive. Pope Francis, 2021. So why did the state lie to the whole world about nicotine and repeat the lie for decades before the global vaccine plan rollout? This is why they had to lie to you. In The Economist, this is dated May 2020. Read the title. In May of 2020, this is 5 years into the global pandemic, vomited on the world. These articles started getting published. Smokers seem less likely than non-smokers to fall ill with COVID-19. Well, what was the plan? The state's plan and the economic plan and the military plan. It was to vaccinate, per Biden and Harris's administration, every American for free is the plan of COVID-19. The World Economic Forum, economics, says we together need to vaccinate the whole world for COVID-19. That's the economic side. And then the military consequences, even the Pope's talking about it. Smokers seem less likely than non-smokers to fall ill with COVID-19. Then News Medical Life Sciences reports here. Study shows lower SARS-CoV-2 infection rates in smokers. October of 2021. Then it's published, Is There a Smoker's Paradox in COVID-19? In this article by Mohammed Sharik Usman and his colleagues. Read the first sentence. Although it is well established that cigarette smoking is associated with morbidity and mortality, disease and death in several respiratory infections, data from recent studies suggest that active smokers are underrepresented among patients with COVID-19. The second sentence. This has led to claims that a smoker's paradox may exist in COVID-19, wherein smokers are protected from infection and severe complications from COVID-19. Oh my God. Their plan to vaccinate all people was about to be destroyed starting in May of 2020 because it was getting out publicly that smokers were appearing to be immune to COVID-19. Okay, well, they were lying to you since 1994 and trying to convince you that smoking and nicotine was bad for you, but really hammering on nicotine. I'm not going to read all of this, but you could read it. The relationship between smoking and coronavirus 2019 has recently received a lot of attention, and they go into it. And they're telling you that smokers appear to be protected against COVID-19. If you look at the right side of the page, you'll see that several countries, including US, China, and France, have had multiple reports in recent studies that active smokers are actually underrepresented with having COVID-19. And the very first complete sentence on the right-hand side, this led to widespread claims that smoking may be protective against COVID-19. Ooh, the state could not allow that widespread notion to be known. In the conclusions of this paper in the British Medical Journal, further investigation into the interaction between smoking and COVID-19 is warranted for two main reasons. Number one, we should assess the possibility of nicotine as a therapeutic option. Oh, really? Did you know that scientists were saying we need to consider that nicotine may be the therapeutic beneficial nutrient to protect people who are smoking from getting COVID? This is December of 2021, by the way. Remember, the plan was to vaccinate everybody. The state's plan was to vaccinate everybody. The Economic Forum's plan was to vaccinate everybody. The Pope, even mentioning military consequences, was to vaccinate. The world needs more vaccines and less military. The world needs more vaccines, less military. Are you following Joseph Goebbels' quote here? It couldn't be more in your face. All right, this is Nicotine and Tobacco Research publication from 2023. Smoking status. This may shock you. This is why they had to lie to you for 30 years before COVID. Smoking status, those who are current smokers or previous smokers or have never smoked, nicotine medication like patches, gums, vaccination, and COVID-19 hospital outcomes. They're looking to see what's the status of people with COVID-19 in hospitals who are smokers currently, who are using nicotine products currently, and who are vaccinated for COVID, and COVID-19 hospitalized outcomes. This is from the University of Wisconsin's medical school, by the way. All right, so this is a study. You'll see Thomas Pasecki, PhD, is the lead author on this study. I wonder if Dr. Pierre Corey, who's from Wisconsin, knew about this study. I hope he did. All right, so here's the abstract summary. Available evidence is mixed, they say, concerning associations between smoking status and COVID-19 clinical outcomes. It's confusing. You're seeing in the media reports that smoking's protecting lives. You're seeing scientific papers and articles that it doesn't save lives, and it's a lie. So it's confusing. Effects of nicotine replacement therapy. Just so y'all know, the effects of nicotine replacement therapy, abbreviated NRT, nicotine replacement therapy is code for nicotine patches, nicotine gum, and nicotine pouches that you can suck on. So nicotine replacement therapy, not unlike hormone replacement therapy, where men and women who have low hormone levels are being told to inject or swallow or implant pellets of hormones. It is a hormone replacement therapy, abbreviated HRT. They are studying here the effects of nicotine replacement therapy. And they're also looking at vaccine status on COVID-19 outcomes, and smokers are unknown. They want to know, what's the correlation? Well, look at the results here. Among current smokers, those who are actively smoking right now during COVID-19, nicotine replacement therapy prescription was, so giving them nicotine patches, gums, and pouches, was associated with reduced deaths from COVID-19. Did you know that? Did you know that current smokers, if you gave them more nicotine, if they were in a COVID-19 hospital, did you know that they had better outcomes and less deaths? Interesting. The more nicotine, the better, they're telling you. The better outcomes for COVID-19 patients. They're already smoking, but they're in a hospital ICU room. They can't smoke in the ICU. So when they gave them nicotine patches, gums, they all recovered. Look at their conclusion. Former smokers, but not current smokers, hospitalized with COVID-19 are at higher risk for severe outcomes. Wait, let's read that again slower. People who used to smoke before COVID, but not people who are smoking during COVID, hospitalized with COVID-19 are at a higher risk for severe outcomes. Well, what do previous smokers before COVID-19 have less of in their body than the current smokers? Nicotine. Let's keep going. Nicotine replacement therapy during COVID-19 hospitalization may reduce mortality deaths for current smokers. Wow, that's amazing. Then you go to Genetic Literacy Project. Smokers are less likely to get COVID-19. French researchers explore whether nicotine might prevent transmission of this supposed bat virus. This is by Hank Campbell, October of 2021, by the way. French researchers explore whether nicotine might prevent transmission. Well, what did they find? This is the actual article from France, dated 2021. Lower rates of daily smokers with symptomatic COVID-19. A monocentric self-report of smoking habit study. So they're just casually asking smokers, have you gotten COVID? Have you gotten sick? Have you PCR tested positive for COVID? But the title is Lower Rate of Daily Smokers with Symptomatic COVID-19. That means people who are smoking are less likely to have symptoms of COVID during COVID. In their study, the results were amongst inpatients, those that were in a hospital, daily smokers represent 2.2 and 3.4% of the 45 dead patients and of the 29 patients transferred to the ICU, respectively. So of those 45 people that died in the hospital from COVID, daily smokers were only 2.2% of those that died. Of those that were transferred to the ICU, which was 29 patients, 3.4% of them were current active smokers. The rate of daily smokers was significantly lower in patients with symptomatic COVID-19. The rate of daily smokers, the percentage of people who were daily smokers, was significantly lower in patients with symptoms of COVID as compared to that in the French general population after standardization by age and sex. So when they looked at the population of France as a whole, people who were smoking every day, those groups of people had the lowest amount of COVID-19 sickness compared to everyone else in the French population who did not smoke and were getting sick. Look at their conclusion. Daily smoker rate in patients with symptomatic COVID-19 is lower as compared to the French general population. What did other French researchers discover about COVID-19 and nicotine? This is a different study I'm about to show you. In April of 2020, French researchers isolated the spike protein genes of the COVID-19 virus, and then they did DNA testing of those spike proteins. And the spike proteins are what you see on the screen, are those little things sticking off of a ball. Just, that's not what the virus looks like, but this is what they want you to see. The spike proteins around there, those little red things, are the spike protein genes of COVID that they said made everybody so sick. Well, this is the study that came out of France in April of 2020. They isolated the spike protein genes of COVID-19 and then published that the spike proteins of COVID are identical to three things. Now, the study's title is a nicotine hypothesis for COVID-19 with preventative and therapeutic implications by Jean-Pierre Changot and his buddies. Inside that paper, they ran DNA tests of the spike proteins of COVID, and you'll see in red circled on the screen, that is the SARS-CoV-2 S. S stands for spike protein. And you'll see these sequences on the right. Well, what they found and published was that SARS-CoV-2's spike protein is identical to the things above it on the infographic. So right above there, you will see two words, cobra toxin and bungarotoxin. They are telling you that the spike protein of COVID actually comes out of the DNA database, being most similar to cobra toxin from the king cobra and bungarotoxin, which comes from a different snake. These are both venom proteins from both the king cobra and a snake called the crate snake. But what they said about these venom proteins, and before I go there, I'm going to highlight that in between cobra toxin and the word bungarotoxin are 3 rabies virus G sequences. So inside of the rabies virus, there's a small little section of these 3 different rabies viruses that have similar codes, genetic codes, as the SARS-CoV-2 spike proteins. Now, this is awesome because I'm not sure if it's in this presentation, but did you know that the rabies virus spike protein, which rabies virus has spike proteins also, did you know that scientists have known for decades that it's actually identical to snake venom proteins that target nicotine receptors? Just like what the French researchers said in April of 2020, cobra venom, bungarotoxin actually target, and you can read it down here. Read in blue. Nicotine, the French researcher said 4 months into the pandemic, by the way, April 2020, nicotine may be suggested as a potential preventative agent against COVID-19 infection. Uh-oh. As early as April of 2020, the lie from the FDA that nicotine was addictive and deadly and toxic was getting in the way of scientific discovery of their planned pandemic, which had economic, political, and military consequences. These scientists say nicotine, the addictive substance the FDA tells you, may be suggested as a potential preventative agent against COVID-19 infection. Both the epidemiological, the disease processing, and clinical evidence and the in silico findings may suggest that COVID-19 infection is a nicotine acetylcholine receptor disease that can be prevented and may be controlled by nicotine. Nicotine would then sterically or allosterically compete with the SARS-CoV-2 virus binding to all nicotine receptors in your body. This legitimates the use of nicotine as a protective agent against SARS-CoV-2 infection and the subsequent deficits it causes in the central nervous system. Thus, in order to prevent the infection and the propagation of the virus through the central nervous system, we plan a therapeutic test against COVID-19 with nicotine and other nicotine agents that include patches or other delivery methods like sniffing and chewing in hospitalized patients and in the general population. I want to highlight here on the screen that underneath the infographic where they show you SARS-CoV-2 spike protein is identical to cobra toxin and bungarotoxin, they write the neurotoxin motifs, the alignment of the genetic material motifs, found in toxins from snakes of the Ophiophagous cobra and bungarus genre, in G from 3 rabies virus strains, and in the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. They are telling you they have found venom proteins that are identical to bungarus snakes called bungarotoxin and cobras called cobratoxin. Well, what is bungarus genre? I just want to show you. Look at the screen. At the top of the screen, you see cobratoxin. Bottom left, you'll see Naja nigrocalis, the black king cobra. And then you'll see Naja, the next one. Those are king cobras. The venom of that cobra is the spike protein of COVID. Then you'll see to the right something called the red-headed crate snake, and you'll see that its Latin scientific name is Bungarus flaviceps. So if you go back above to the red underlined statements, the neurotoxin motifs of the spike protein of COVID were found in toxins from snakes of the cobra and Bungarus genre. Genre means a group of. The Bungarus genre are the crate snakes, and their venom is called bungarotoxin. Nicotine, you'll see there, I already went through that. In conclusion, the French scientists in April of 2020 concluded, we propose and try to justify the hypothesis that nicotine receptors in the human body play a critical role in the disease process of SARS-CoV-2 infection, and as a consequence propose nicotine and nicotine agents as a possible therapy for SARS-CoV-2 infection. So I want to continue here. That was 4 years ago from the time I'm actually producing this presentation. This is April of 2024 that I'm recording this. This paper about nicotine's protective and preventative ability to stop COVID-19 infection worldwide was 4 years ago in April of 2020. These on the screen are some of the long hauler COVID symptoms that have been published. There's a total of 21 of them in total, but I'm going to give you the top list of those listed symptoms that people, when they get these venom proteins inside their body called spike proteins, they live with chronic symptoms forever, it appears, after getting COVID. These are called long hauler COVID symptoms, and I'm going to review them. They're on the screen, and these are published by scientists around the world. Symptoms of post-COVID syndrome are chronic fatigue, dizziness, can't take deep breaths, a low-grade fever, loss of taste and smell, memory lapses, muscle pain and weakness, diarrhea, vomiting, concentration difficulties, sleep difficulties, mood disorders, headaches, chest tightness and pain, heart palpitations, cognitive impairment, motor deficits, exercise intolerance, new onset of diabetes, actually, and new onset of high blood pressure. In January 2023, a study was published by Marco Letsky, which highlights 4 case studies of long hauler COVID patients and their miraculous recovery in just 6 days of using 7 milligram nicotine patches topically. A link to the study is in the middle of the screen. The conclusion of the study, I quote, this is from January of 2023, people, quote, treating several individuals suffering from post-COVID-19 syndrome with a nicotine patch application, we witnessed improvements ranging from immediate and substantial to complete remission in a matter of days. Do you start to understand why the FDA and the states around the world had to lie to you about nicotine for 30 years? You're going to learn later in this presentation why, what was the result of the lie for the last 30 years in America alone, starting in 1994. This is the study that I was just quoting by Marco Letsky. Is the post-COVID-19 syndrome a severe impairment of acetylcholine orchestrated neuromodulation that responds to nicotine administration? The year 2023. This is case number 1. They took 4 individuals who actually had all the symptoms at the bottom of the screen that was lingering for at least a year and a half and never responded or improved using medications like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and physical rehabilitation and supplements. These people have been suffering with long hauler COVID symptoms, all 4 of them in this study, for at least a year and a half without any improvements in their symptoms at all. This is case number 1. He's a male, 19 years of age. At the bottom, you will see he suffered with dizziness, loss of smell and taste, diarrhea, chest tightness and pain for a year and a half plus after getting COVID. You will see on the screen the nicotine patch wearing for 6 days is in red, is the red bar. 4 days before all 4 of these people were asked to wear a nicotine patch for only 6 days, they were asked to chart on a scale of 0 to 8 how intense was their symptoms. You will see on the screen that this guy, 19 years old, marked his symptoms of dizziness at a 5, his loss of taste and smell at a 5 out of 8. For 4 days, it stayed there until day 1, when he started wearing the nicotine patch, and you immediately start seeing the symptoms disappearing. Now, if you count the days on the bottom of the graph, he only wore the nicotine patch for 6 days and then stopped wearing the patch after day 6. From day 1 of wearing the patch, all of his symptoms disappeared by day 16 after starting the patch. He did not wear the patch for 16 days. They show you he only wore it for 6 days. The nicotine circulating in his body from the nicotine patch for the next 16 days totally cured him of all of his long hauler COVID symptoms that nothing else cured. Case number 2, female, 31 years of age, who struggled with, look at the bottom of the screen, 1.5 years of chronic fatigue, headache, loss of taste and smell, chest tightness and pain, exercise intolerance, memory lapses, and concentration difficulties. You will see at the far left where she marked all the severity of her symptoms. Chronic fatigue was at a 4 out of 8. The black one is memory lapses, was at a 4 out of 8. Loss of taste and smell was at a 4 out of 8. You'll see these markings. Ageusia, sorry, is loss of taste. Notice these are all at a 4. Even their headaches were at a 4. Exercise intolerance was at a 4. And then they started wearing a nicotine patch, this person did, for 6 days only. Notice every single symptom went up and down during the days wearing the patches. And then she took the patches off on day 6. And by day 23, after starting the nicotine patches, every single one of their long hauler COVID symptoms had completely been erased from her body. This guy decided to be a man. This is funny to read in the study. This guy was your typical male. This guy was told to wear a nicotine patch of 7 milligram dosing each day for 6 days straight, and was told by the scientist before wearing the patch, they expected that all of his symptoms would actually disappear within 6 days, or after 6 days of using these drugs, the nicotine patch, which isn't a drug, sorry, the nicotine patch. To read the study is kind of funny. This guy said that when he heard the scientists or researchers tell him to wear a nicotine patch for 6 days at 7 milligrams, this guy was a man and did not follow instructions. He decided if one 7 milligram nicotine patch was going to help him heal, he was going to be a man, a macho man, and he was going to wear 2 7 milligram nicotine patches every day. So instead of 7 milligrams of nicotine a day, he was going to wear 14 milligrams every day. Well, if you notice, he only wore nicotine patches for 1 day. So you'll see this red bar is a spike. He only wore the nicotine patches for 1 day. And because he wore 14 milligrams, which was more than the scientists asked him to, he started getting really nauseous and started throwing up from that much nicotine. This guy did. And as a result of puking that day and feeling really nauseous and sick, he called the scientists the next day and said, I am not doing this nicotine study anymore. And the scientist said, why not? And he told them, I got sick. And they said, why would you have gotten sick? And he goes, well, I decided to do twice as much as what you told me. I wore 2 patches instead of 1. And it made me really sick. And the scientist said, okay, well, if you're going to not follow directions and you're not going to continue the study, will you please still report back to us how your body responds to the nicotine doses you got in just 1 day? And you'll notice on the screen, this guy, 41 years old, struggled with all of these symptoms for at least 1.5 years up to 2 years. Chronic fatigue, diarrhea, inability to take a deep breath called dyspnea, vomiting, anosmia, loss of smell, sleep difficulties, ageusia, loss of taste, headache, muscle pain, and weakness. That's what he struggled with for 1.5 years. And you'll see on the screen, some of his symptoms were at a 5 every day before starting his nicotine patch for 1 day. Patches. Well, you notice this big red spike. Then you'll notice the diarrhea in black spiked and the vomiting spiked on the same day he took the nicotine patch. This is what he was complaining about. This made me really nauseous. I want you guys to take note. He only wore 2 nicotine patches for 1 day. 1 day only. Notice what happened by day 15 after wearing the patches. From day 1 to day 15, all of his symptoms are disappearing. By day 15, all of them were gone and at 0. How miraculous was that? The fourth individual, a male of 52 years of age, actually decided to do half a patch on day one and then wear, or first couple days, then wear the full 7 milligram nicotine patch the rest of the time. This person, male, 52 years old, had for a year and a half to 2 years lingering symptoms since having COVID of chronic fatigue, mood disorders like schizophrenia, bipolarism, manic depression, dyspnea, couldn't take a deep breath, chest tightness and pain, concentration difficulties, and heart palpitations, and sleep difficulties. I want y'all to notice that when he increased his nicotine patch in the study, the red bar, notice what happened to the yellow band. It immediately started to die and it went to 0. It actually went to 0 on the first day he added nicotine patches of any kind. When he increased the dose, a slight heart palpitation increase, and then it died on day 6 and never returned. All of his heart palpitations he had been struggling with for a year and a half disappeared from the nicotine patches. But notice by day 7, on this particular person, day 7 after starting the nicotine patches, which were only for 6 days, all of his symptoms were at 0, none of them. I want to share with you what was reported in this paper by the researchers. In each case, signs of exhaustion, such as fatigue, weakness, breathlessness, and exercise intolerance improved rapidly and across the board following nicotine exposure. At the very latest, by day 6, each of the symptoms of fatigue, weakness, breathlessness, and exercise intolerance improved. In cases with impairment or loss of the senses of taste and smell, improvement was observed over a longer period, with complete restoration of smell and taste of these senses over anywhere from 13 days to 16 days. Well, I don't know about you, but if you didn't taste anything or smell anything for a year and a half, and you were told if you just did something for 6 days, that within 13 to 16 days, it could all be restored, wouldn't you have done it? The next question the authors wanted to address in their paper was, will I become addicted to the nicotine patches? And this is for all of you listening. The study authors addressed the concerns of addiction possibly to nicotine patches. Remember, I've already gone through that Harvard figured out nicotine alone is not addictive. Transcutaneous, that means skin, administration of nicotine ensures constant blood levels of nicotine without relevant peak levels. Thus, we did not see any development of nicotine dependence in the context of nicotine patch therapy. From the author's point of view, this is not to be expected. So if you're going to use nicotine patches and you yourself are still worried after this presentation that nicotine might be addictive, the authors told you this didn't happen to any of the people they gave the patches to for 6 days. So go do it. The conclusions of the paper from January of 2023, nicotine patches curing all long hauler COVID symptoms. They conclude, based on the results of this case study, this treatment option using nicotine patches to combat long haul COVID seems far superior to the time-consuming, often underwhelming or disappointing, costly and complex rehab measures currently available to these patients. So whatever's going on in the conventional medical world, nicotine patches is working way faster and is far superior to whatever else you're going to be asked to do. So ask your doctor if 7 milligram nicotine patches are right for you. There's an example of some. Rugby is the brand I recommend the most. Dr. Ed Group and I were reviewing all of the ingredients and nicotine patches around the world available. Rugby patches were the cleanest, least toxic that we could find. And also, it doesn't matter though. Nicoderm patches can be used. You're only using them for 6 days. Let's continue this presentation. If tobacco products contain nicotine, and if nicotine found in tobacco products is known to be an antidote for the state planned and future COVID-19 pandemic, and the major consequence of the plan is to vaccinate the whole world for COVID-19, the state would need to cover or shield or hide the whole world from the curing power of nicotine. Remember, Joseph Goebbels said, father of propaganda, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be only maintained for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and/or military consequences of the lie. He later says in this quote, it thus becomes vitally important for the state, the government, to use not some, but to use all of its powers to repress dissent, meaning the truth to get out, For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie. And thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state slash FDA slash governments around the world. Now we're going to focus on the last part of his famous quote, where he states, it is vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. Well, during COVID-19, did the states use all of its powers to hide the truth from you about nicotine and smokers not being affected by COVID? Remember, the truth is the mortal enemy of this lie, and the truth is the greatest enemy of the government. Well, did they use all of their powers? Let's see. Here's News Medical Life Sciences, April 2020. This is the same month that the French researchers, I just took you through their study, figured out that cobra toxin and bungaro toxin are the spike proteins of COVID and that nicotine protects people from these venoms, and then said nicotine will help prevent the pandemic and worsening disease outcomes during COVID. In the same month, News Medical Life Sciences and this girl, Angela Bethsaida, produces this article. Smokers need to quit during coronavirus pandemic. All right, so the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and the state has to use all of its powers to repress dissent from the truth. Getting out. What did the state do? They got medical journals to start writing articles as early as April of 2020 about quitting smoking. They also got the NIH, which is a federal agency, a government state-funded agency. The NIH published this is August of 2022, smoking associated with increased risk of severe COVID-19 outcomes. No, it isn't. I just showed you the studies, even in hospitals, that was not true. ABC News, smoking. Now they're getting into the mainstream media. Mainstream media is reporting smoking, vaping increases risk of death from COVID, study finds. No, it doesn't. And no, it didn't. They lied to you. This is July of 2022. The Seattle Times, young smokers at higher risk for severe COVID-19 symptoms than smokers their age. They're getting into the newspaper mainstream media now. This is August 10th, 2020. They have to use all their powers. The state has to use all their powers to repress dissent. They have to cover up the truth. USA Today, people who smoke are prioritized to get the COVID-19 vaccine before the general population. Oh, really? You want to know why? Why would the government state we're going to give the COVID-19 vaccines to people who are smoking first? Why would they say that? This is February of 2020, just 3 months into the COVID-19 vaccine agenda. You want to know why? They had to lie to the smokers. The smokers weren't getting COVID and weren't getting sick. So guess who was going to be the last people to line up at Home Depot in the parking lot to get a vaccine for COVID? All the people that weren't getting sick were never going to show up. So they had to prioritize and lie to you that we care about smokers most. We have to inject them most. So we're going to make them the priority over the general population. Oh my God. USA Today. Thank you for lying. NBC, in their article, wrote, coronavirus may be worse for smokers and vapors, and youth won't save you. Oh my God, these people are ridiculous. All right, so this was the state's attempts to repress the lie. It even went as far as the World Health Organization. They published, the WHO supports people quitting tobacco to reduce the risk of severe COVID-19. Oh my God, they all had to lie to you. Everybody's on the train. They're all lying. The state had to lie. National Public Radio, coronavirus epidemic gives smokers another scary reason to quit. Oh, now National Public Radio in May of 2020, the month after the French study published, the scientists told you DNA evidence proves nicotine will protect people from getting COVID, and we should start doing studies with nicotine agents to prevent COVID. They're going to tell you the very next month that smokers have another new scary reason to quit. They're most susceptible to COVID-19. Look at it. Look at it. What it says underneath the subtitle. It reads, increasing evidence suggests people who smoke are more likely to become severely ill and die from COVID-19 than non-smokers. May 2020. Was that true in May of 2020? No. In April of 2020, scientists around the world were telling you there's this weird paradox. Smokers aren't getting COVID, and they're the least represented in hospitals of dying. In fact, smokers in hospitals at the time, they were giving nicotine patches and agents to them, and they were curing them of COVID. CDC reported. This is why, look up at the top, I changed the subject a little bit. We're going to go back to the first part of Joseph Goebbels' quote. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. Well, I wanted to know, since the FDA started lying to Americans in 1994 that nicotine was the agent making tobacco products addictive, I wanted to know what was the percentage of Americans from 1990 to the pandemic? How many were smoking in 1994 when they started this smear campaign on nicotine? And how many Americans were smoking by the year 2020 when COVID started their planned pandemic? Well, this is from the CDC. Cigarette smoking among adults in the United States in 1990. Read the quote. In 1990, an estimated 89.9 million American adults were smoking, which represented over 50% of American adults. 50.1%. All right, so 4 years later, the FDA starts lying to all of us, telling us that nicotine is addictive and avoid tobacco and don't trust tobacco. Tobacco causes death and injury and cancer and blah, blah, blah. They've lied to you this whole time. So over a 26-year period leading up to 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, I wanted to know, how successful was the lie being repeated for 30 years and how many people actually believed it? Well, 50% of American adults, 89, almost 90 million Americans were smoking in 1990. What was it by the year 2021? By the year 2020 and 2021, the CDC reports in this article titled Current Cigarette Smoking Among Adults in the U.S., in 2021, nearly 12 of every 100 U.S. adults aged 18 years or older is smoking. Look at the percentage of adults in America smoking by the time the pandemic shows up. By then, it's 11% of American adults. That means 90% of American adults are now ripe and deficient in nicotine and are not being exposed to nicotine every single day because they're not smoking. 90% of all Americans, by the time the pandemic rolled around, were now going to get sick from their venom-laced bioweapon because they don't have nicotine inside of them. And now 90% of Americans who are believing the lie and avoiding tobacco products are now going to get sick. And when they get sick, they are going to be gullible and believe that they need a vaccine to save them. Remember, look at the top. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. 90% of Americans, adults, believed the lie come the pandemic. All right, from 1999 or 1990 to 2021, U.S. smoking plummets from 50% of American adults to 11%. That would mean that 90% of American adults by 2020, like I just said, were ripe for them to be susceptible to getting sick from their planned pandemic because 90% of Americans are not using nicotine-containing tobacco products. And when 90% of Americans are now susceptible to getting sick during their planned pandemic, then and only then can the state's planned consequence to vaccinate the whole world will be much easier to promote and sell to the masses. Would you like to know some other truths about nicotine that the state had to shield you from since 1994? I would like to show you. It is not just about COVID. This is much bigger. In fact, I'm about to dive into the rest of this presentation is going to be showing you what is the economic and political consequences of the lie that nicotine is addictive that Joseph Goebbels quoted. When I go through the next list of benefits of nicotine published in medical journals, you should start thinking every time I mention a disease process or symptom that is improved with nicotine, I want you to think how many prescription drugs are being prescribed to Americans because they are avoiding nicotine. How many prescription drugs are Americans swallowing every day for these diseases that nicotine has been proven, I'm about to show you, are cured by nicotine, prevented and improved by nicotine? And you will start to realize that there is a massive political and economic consequence to the lie that nicotine is addictive. I was shocked by all this information, and you should be too. The money and greed that has been created by Americans believing this lie is astounding. All right, so right out of PubMed in 2021, molecular insights into the benefits of nicotine on memory and cognition. Now think, every time I show you these diseases and these symptoms, I want you to be thinking, how many drugs are being prescribed to Americans, paid for by health insurance and Medicare and Medicaid? How many drugs are being prescribed by MDs to people with these conditions that nicotine helps? And you start to realize, what is the economic and political consequence of the lie? A lot of people are making money, tons of money, off of prescribing you drugs when nicotine cures these problems. Now, you've learned nicotine is not only in tobacco products, it's in tobacco leaves, and it's in a whole bunch of vegetables. And it comes in nicotine patches and nicotine gum and nicotine pouches you can just suck on. This is molecular insights into the benefits of nicotine on memory and cognition. Did you know nicotine improves memory? Oh my God, why is Joe Biden not on nicotine? Why is he not smoking? Why is he not wearing nicotine patches? Oh my gosh. Okay. In this article, you'll see at the bottom, the published by the NIH paper. Just follow along here, the highlighted sections of these papers. The health risks of nicotine are well known, obviously, because the FDA has been lying to you, but there is some evidence of its beneficial effects on cognitive function, brain function. Nicotine administration, nicotine, not tobacco, nicotine administration can improve cognitive impairment in Alzheimer's disease and in the gait movement problems and memory impairment in Parkinson's disease. Holy crap. Did you know that? Did you know that millions of people in America right now diagnosed with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's? Did you know that all their symptoms can be improved with nicotine? And how many neurologists do you think have recommended nicotine patches and nicotine gum to their Alzheimer, Parkinson's suffering patients? I bet you there's not been a damn single one of them unless they watch my presentations. And then my question for you is if the NIH knows this and publishing it on their website on pubmed.gov, why don't the medical doctors know this stuff? How come the chiropractors got to tell you this and show you this? Well, you're starting to realize why. MDs and the federal government make more money off of drugs than anything else. Politicians are paid by lobbyists from the pharmaceutical companies more than anybody else. That's the political and economic consequence of every lie I'm about to show you about nicotine. In terms, they continue, of its mechanism of action, nicotine slows the progression of Parkinson's disease. Oh my God. By inhibiting something called sirtuin 6, which is a stress responsive protein, thereby decreasing nerve death and improving nerve survival in the brain. In Alzheimer's disease, nicotine improves cognitive impairment. How many of your loved ones who have Alzheimer's and dementia have been told that nicotine by itself will improve their memory from relapsing and recover their memory, actually? And how many of those Alzheimer's patients are being prescribed medications when nicotine would have solved it and is much cheaper and is found in vegetables? Nicotine may also activate thyroid receptor signaling pathways to improve memory impairment caused by hypothyroidism. Holy crap. How many millions of Americans are struggling with hypothyroid problems and are being prescribed Synthroid, levothyroxine, Naturethroid, Armour Thyroid? How many prescriptions are being sold to people with hypothyroid problems, which includes they have now suffering memory problems? How many endocrinologists seeing thyroid sufferers are being told that nicotine can improve their memory and overall function of life? And if not, why not? Why have they been lied to? And why has this information been withheld from them when the state, the NIH, knows this to be true? They're even publishing it. They're the ones that put this up on the flipping their own platform. They continue. In healthy individuals, nicotine improves memory impairment caused by sleep deprivation. What? How much 5-hour energy is being sold, and how many antidepressants and stimulants like Adderall, Ritalin, and others are being prescribed to people to improve cognitive function and memory when sleep deprivation is the cause? Furthermore, nicotine may improve memory function through its effect on chromatin modification via the inhibition of histone deacetylases, which causes transcriptional changes in memory-related genes. Yeah, I have to focus on this one. There's a whole bunch of scientific jargon to make you not know exactly what they're saying. I want to focus on the last 4 words, actually, of that statement. Nicotine may improve memory function through changes in memory-related genes. Okay, this is so profound, it's incredible. The NIH is publishing here that nicotine alone reverses and makes changes to memory-related genes. Did you know that nicotine improves memory-related genes' function? Okay, so this is important. Everyone who's been told that their loved one has Alzheimer's and has dementia and memory loss, and that it is related to a family inherited gene, Everyone's heard this, by the way. Does Alzheimer's run in your family? Does dementia run in your family? Does memory lapse run in your family? Then it's a genetic disorder. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, all have memory issues. They will tell you these are genetic disorders. They are not at all 100% predictors if individuals in your family have genes that create memory lapse issues in the future, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. This statement here tells you that nicotine changes memory-related genes. So if people have been told that they have a gene they inherited that is creating their dementia, you can turn those genes off with nicotine and your memory will come back. How many of you have been told that? And they explain to you how it works. It works on affecting chromatin modification, which is a chemical in your body, via the inhibition of histone deacetylases, which causes changes in memory-related genes. Nicotine prevents that from happening. Oh my God. If you know anybody who's losing their memory, please, for the love of God, get them nicotine products. Then the NIH says, finally, nicotine administration has been demonstrated to rescue long-term potentiation in individuals with sleep deprivation, rescues long-term people who have Alzheimer's disease for a long time. It's rescuing people from the terrible side effects of Alzheimer's. Nicotine does by itself. And it rescues people from long-term chronic stress and hypothyroidism. Holy crap. Has your endocrinologist told you that nicotine was right for you? And if they didn't, why the F not is what I would like to know. Nicotine has several also cognitive benefits, even in healthy individuals, as well as in those with cognitive dysfunction, brain, mental disorders associated with various diseases. Are you starting to grasp why the FDA had to lie to you? The FDA makes most of its money from drug companies. Well, if people knew nicotine in plants could reverse their diseases and prevent them from getting them, and even turn off genetic propensities for dementia, if you knew that, you wouldn't need their damn drugs. You wouldn't need to set up clinic appointments. You wouldn't want to make sure you had health insurance to pay for the damn drugs. This is the economic and political consequence of the lie. January 2017, it's published that nicotine reverses dysfunctions of the frontal part of the brain in animal models with addiction and schizophrenia. Holy crap. Did you know that nicotine prevents and reverses schizophrenia? And it does. And before I go any further in this, I have to state, it's going to say in animal models. You read that in animal models? Did you know that every scientist on Earth who studies diseases with chemicals, drugs, and animals, before they do it to humans, do you know that every single one of the scientists admit that the reason why we study drugs and chemicals in animals first before we give them to humans is because mice, rats, rabbits, ferrets, you name it, all mammals have the exact same genes called chromosomes as human beings do. And they go on further to state, if it's going to happen in an animal, it's going to happen in a human. This is why all drug studies occur in mice, rats, rabbits, ferrets before they give it to humans. They already know what's going to happen to the human when they give them the drug. That's where all the side effects listed for every drug come from. They did it to animals. Oh my God, all this crap happened to the animals. Now let's go give it to humans. And the same thing happens. So in this study, nicotine reverses schizophrenia and addiction in animal models. Guess what it's going to do in humans? They know it's going to do this in humans. And this is not the only study. There's 3 of these I'm going to show you. Watch this. In this first study, chronic nicotine administration reversed the front of the brain problem, suggesting that administration of nicotine may represent a therapeutic strategy for the treatment of schizophrenia. Holy crap. As your loved one that has been institutionalized with schizophrenia, has the psychiatrist recommended nicotine patches or nicotine gum? And if not, why the hell not? And they continue, a physiological basis for the tendency of patients. This explains why it is so many patients with schizophrenia self-medicate by smoking, because it has nicotine that helps them. Here's another study in 2018, the very next year, by the NIH. It's on their website. Nicotine self-administration reverses cognitive deficits in a rat model for schizophrenia. Why do you think they've been studying schizophrenia in rats? Nicotine, but not saline, salt water, self-administration. Listen, this is rats that are schizophrenic have had their brain damaged to mimic schizophrenia in humans by chemicals and trauma. They state here they gave these animals like in water, they gave them nicotine and salt water. And they wanted to know, what do these schizophrenic rats choose? They always chose the nicotine water over salt water. They write here nicotine, but not saline, self-administration. They did not give the animals the nicotine or the salt water. The animals had to go get it themselves. Listen to what they say. When animals who self-administered nicotine, they saw significantly nicotine ameliorated or dissolved or reversed the cognitive deficits induced by MIA. MIA is what they gave the animals to create. You'll see it above. Maternal immune activation, MIA. When they did this to the animals, it made them schizophrenic. When they gave them nicotine and allowed the animals to choose nicotine or salt water, they all chose nicotine. And those that chose the nicotine, their cognitive deficits disappeared. Nicotine after self-administration significantly improved. These data lend support for the self-medication hypothesis for schizophrenia. These schizophrenic rats kept choosing the nicotine water. And they're saying this must be why schizophrenic adults, a lot of them choose to smoke. The NIH again in 2016 writes, nicotine ameliorates schizophrenia like cognitive deficits. Wow, did y'all know this? Maternal exposure to infectious agents, viruses, bacteria, fungus is a predisposing factor for schizophrenia with associated cognitive deficits in offspring. So if a mother has an infection and gives birth to animals, they often see these infections lead to schizophrenic type tendencies in animals and humans. Repeated nicotine treatment led to global means total brain and selective improvements in performance. How many schizophrenic drugs are being given to schizophrenic patients? Nicotine reversed LPS-induced deficits in selective attention and induced a global enhancement of sensory motor gating, being able to control your body. Did you know nicotine promotes nerve in the brain, nerves? Nicotine promotes nerve survival and partially protects from Parkinson's disease by suppressing this chemical that causes it called SIRT6. 2018. Well, how many drugs are being prescribed for Parkinson's? How many of you knew that nicotine promotes brain nerve survival and partially protects against Parkinson's? In their study, they state Parkinson's disease is characterized by progressive death of dopamine nerves, leading to motor and cognitive dysfunction. Motor means moving the body. This is why you see the shaking and gait issues, walking issues with Parkinson's patients. Did you know nicotine? Epidemiological studies consistently show that the use of tobacco reduces the risk of developing Parkinson's. Holy crap. Did you know smoking reduces the risk of developing Parkinson's? Well, it's about to get even more disturbing, what they know. We report that nicotine reduces the abundance of something called SIRT6 in neuronal culture and brain tissue. Nicotine does it. We find that the reduction of SIRT6 is partially responsible for the nerve protection afforded by nicotine. Additionally, this component called SIRT6 abundance is greater in Parkinson's patients' brains, and it is decreased in amount in the brains of tobacco users. Did you know cigarette smoking helps to protect you from getting Parkinson's? And why hasn't the government told you that? Why doesn't your medical doctors tell you that? In fact, 100% of you listening to this presentation right now, if you went to your neurologist and said, I have a question, or any MD on earth, does smoking prevent Parkinson's or worsen it? They're all going to tell you it is a risk factor for developing Parkinson's. And it effing isn't. And then you should wonder, why don't they know this stuff? The chiropractor, Dr. Ardis, showed you. Now, I hope my little statements here and phrases aren't bothering you, but this stuff makes me super angry. Our data suggests that SIRT6, this chemical that plays a disease process and pro-inflammatory role in Parkinson's, that nicotine can provide brain protection by accelerating the degradation or breaking down of that chemical that causes Parkinson's called SIRT6. Did you know nicotine might have a protective effect in the disease development of multiple sclerosis? This is 2013, NIH. The states admitting nicotine has a protective effect in multiple sclerosis. Oh, God. How many neurologists are telling their patients that nicotine can help them with MS? All right, the objective of the study was watch this study. This is incredible. The objective. The use of moist snuff, tobacco you put in your lips and suck on, is common in Sweden and leads to exposure to high doses of nicotine. Recent studies indicate that exposure to nicotine could modulate immune responses. The aim of this study was to investigate the influence of tobacco snuff use on the risk of developing multiple sclerosis, taking smoking habits into consideration also. So not just tobacco snuff in your lip, but there are people who are smoking also. Look at the results of the study in Sweden. Snuff users have a decreased risk of developing MS compared with those who have never used moist snuff. And we found clear evidence of an inverse dose response correlation between cumulative dose of snuff use and the risk of developing the disease of MS. To clarify, these scientists who the NIH, the state, published this on their website in 2013, they are stating the more tobacco snuff a person uses, dose-dependent correlation. The more tobacco they used, the more often they used it, the less likely they were to develop MS. But watch this. We further observed that subjects who combined both smoking and snuff use had even a significantly lower risk for developing MS than smokers who had never used moist snuff. Also, after adjustment for amount of smoking. So if the person smoked but didn't use enough snuff, they were at higher risk than those who did both smoking and snuff use. So what you're learning here is the more tobacco used, the significantly lower risk of people developing MS. Our results add evidence to the hypothesis that nicotine exerts anti-inflammatory and immune modulating effects in a way that might decrease the risk of developing MS. Then in 2022, the NIH, the state, decides to publish this article, Nicotine and Inflammatory Diseases, Anti-Inflammatory and Pro-Inflammatory Effects. Did you know that nicotine is both anti-inflammatory and possibly pro-inflammatory? Well, let's look at the anti-inflammatory benefits. According to the data analysis from recent studies in the past 20 years, 20 years of the 30 years you've been lied to, nicotine exerts much more anti-inflammatory effects than it does pro-inflammatory ones, especially in ulcerative colitis, arthritis, sepsis, and endotoxemia. Holy crap. Did you know nicotine for the last 20 years in science papers? Science, lab technicians, researchers, the government investing funding and giving grants. Did you know that in the same 30 years that they've been lying to you that nicotine is addictive and you should avoid it? And then lied to you during the pandemic that smokers were at highest risk when they weren't. Did you know that in the same 20 years of those 30 years, science has been proving that nicotine exerts a much more anti-inflammatory effect than pro-inflammatory one? Now, I'm going to stay here for a second. Anybody living with a condition that ends, diagnosed by a medical doctor, with the abbreviation itis, I-T-I-S, itis, arthritis, colitis, ulcerative colitis, it doesn't matter. Anything with itis means inflammation, of. Anybody diagnosed with an inflammatory condition, you should know nicotine has much more anti-inflammatory properties than increasing inflammation. Now, this is important. Every human being in America who's been diagnosed with an inflammatory condition that ends with itis, arthritis, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, doesn't matter. If you have been diagnosed with an inflammatory disease of any kind, all of you have been told by your rheumatologist, who specializes in autoimmune inflammatory conditions especially, you're going to be told that you need to avoid nightshade vegetables. And you're going to be told that nightshade vegetables, zucchini, squash, eggplants, will increase the inflammation in your body. I just showed you that nightshade vegetables have the highest amount of nicotine in them. I believe that all of you have been lied to about the inflammatory properties of these veggies because they're the highest containing vegetables with nicotine. And if you ate them after being diagnosed with an inflammatory condition, the nicotine, as you read here, I quote, in the past 20 years, has been proven to have a much more anti-inflammatory effect, not an inflammatory effect. I believe we've also been lied to about our vegetables. And they've convinced the medical doctors to tell you, while you go on your prednisone and anti-inflammatory drugs for the rest of your life, to avoid these veggies that have nicotine in them. And your medical doctor has no effing clue that the reason they're being told at conventions and in medical journals to tell your patients to avoid nightshade vegetables is because they have nicotine in them. Remember, the state has to use all of its powers to repress dissent, repress the truth getting out. So they're not going to tell the medical doctors the truth. They're not going to tell their patients the truth. They're not going to tell the media the truth. They're not going to tell anybody the truth. They're going to keep it hidden in these research studies. Like here, did you know that nicotine, as in this statement on the screen right now, has been proven to reduce inflammation of people suffering with ulcerative colitis and arthritis? Well, the millions of you with rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, gouty arthritis, osteoarthritis, you should be pissed that your medical doctor has not told you that nicotine is a preventative against these conditions and can improve your inflammation. And they've never told you nicotine patches or gums should be considered. The NIH publishes here in 2015, reduction of aggressive episodes after repeated nicotine patches in a hospitalized adolescent with autism spectrum disorder. They were trying to take this kid who's been hospitalized. This autistic kid was violently resisting laying in a hospital bed, and they were considering restraining this child to the bed with handcuffs or straps. And one of the doctors actually didn't want to do the restraints, got an impression. I wonder if I put nicotine patches on this kid, if it'll calm him down and make him stop being so violent and aggressive. In their study, published by the NIH, the state, they wrote, aggression remains a major cause of morbidity or injury in patients with autism spectrum disorder. Current drug therapy for aggression is not always effective and is often associated with more injury, death. Nicotinic acetylcholinergic neurotransmission nicotine receptors may play a prominent role in autism spectrum disorder disease process called pathophysiology based on human and animal studies. Did you know that nicotine receptors play a huge prominent role in autism? Are you starting to gather the picture of why the FDA needed to lie to all of you about nicotine? And preclinical studies show nicotine administration can reduce aggression-related behaviors. Transdermal nicotine patches, has been used to treat agitation in neuropsychiatric conditions with cholinergic dysfunction, acetylcholine dysfunction. That's what nicotine receptors allow to transfer between nerves, is acetylcholine. Here we report the use of nicotine patches as an adjunctive medication to treat aggression in a hospitalized adolescent with autism. Nicotine patches was currently well tolerated and reduced the need for emergency medication and restraint. Wow. They just use a nicotine patch to calm the kid down with autism. These findings suggest further study of nicotine patches for aggression comorbid with autism is warranted. The scientists are saying, man, we need to do more studies of nicotine patches with autistic kids and adults. Well, they did. This is 2018. An exploratory trial of nicotine patches for aggression and irritability in adults with autism spectrum disorder. We explored the feasibility, tolerability, and preliminary efficacy of targeting nicotine receptors using nicotine patches to reduce aggressive symptoms in adults with autism. 8 people, were randomized in a double-blind crossover trial of 7 milligram transdermal nicotine patches, or a placebo, the same exact nicotine patches they used in the COVID-19 long hauler COVID studies. Each of these patients with autism were to wear these nicotine patches for 1 week. All participants tolerated nicotine treatment well, they report. They continue. Aberrant behavior checklist irritability subscale, a test they use to measure aggressiveness and behavior issues in autism kids. And the change from baseline was improved by nicotine compared to placebo. Did y'all know that the behaviors of autistic adults could be improved with nicotine in 1 week? Sleep ratings of autistic kids were also improved. Adults, sorry. Sleep ratings were also improved by nicotine and correlated with ABC1 improvement. These findings support further investigation of nicotine agonists, like nicotine, for aggression in sleep and autism disorders. If you or a loved one has autistic kids, or are married to an autistic person, or have an autistic loved one, you should be very excited about this, like I was. In the Journal of Pharmacology, in the Journal of Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics, they published this study in 2002. This is 22 years ago. Nicotine reduces the incidence of type 1 diabetes in mice. Remember, if it happens in a mouse, it happens in a human. Nicotine reduces the incidence of type 1 diabetes. Oh my God. In the study, they write, nicotine has been previously shown to have immunosuppressive actions. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease resulting from the specific destruction of insulin-producing cells in the pancreas called B cells or beta cells. Thus, we hypothesize that nicotine may exert protective effects against type 1 diabetes. Nicotine treatment reduced the high blood sugar and incidence of disease in both the MLDS and NOD mouse models of diabetes. Nicotine also protected against the diabetes-induced decrease in pancreatic insulin being released and its content in the blood observed in both animal models. Holy crap, did you know nicotine increases insulin production inside your bloodstream? And did you know nicotine also protects against diabetes destroying the cells in your pancreas that produce insulin? Okay. Remember, Joseph Goebbels said, the state has to use all of its powers to repress the truth from getting out. And they have to shield you from the economic and political consequences of the lie. By lying to millions of Americans that nicotine is addictive and it should be avoided and scaring you. Do you know how many diabetes drugs are being sold to Americans and worldwide? Do you know how much insulin, glucophage, metformin is being prescribed? Insulin pumps, devices to be injected into your skin and sit there forever, tied to an app on your phone to measure your blood sugar. Did you know nicotine has been proven to do this? Nicotine treatment reduces the incidence of type 1 diabetes in 2 animal models by changing the profile of pancreatic cytokine expression from Th1 to Th2. Scientists and MDs, you're welcome. Did you know nicotine can dissolve brain tumors in hours? This lie just gets bigger and bigger and makes more and more money for the government and for drug companies. But did you know nicotine can dissolve brain tumors in hours? Well, there's a brain tumor image. In 2021, you'll see bottom left of the screen, there was a study done called alpha conotoxins and alpha cobratoxin. This conotoxins are cone snail venoms from creatures in the ocean, 15 of which were found in all COVID-19 positive patients. In the Italy study by Carlo Brogna. I've reviewed that many, many times over the last several years. So cone snail venom called conotoxins, alpha conotoxins, and alpha cobratoxin, the spike proteins of COVID from king cobras, promote, while these 2 other agents, lipooxygenase and cyclooxygenase inhibitors, suppress the proliferation of glioma C6 cells. So I'm going to take out the part of the 2 products, lipooxygenase and cyclooxygenase inhibitors, suppress. We're going to delete that part of the title of the sentence. And we're going to read what the cone snail venoms and cobratoxin venom does, the spike proteins of COVID, and the venoms found in all COVID patients. This study, by the way, was done while you and I were being locked down during COVID. So scientists were allowed to go study what the effects of the venoms found in every COVID-19 patient was while we were being locked down in our homes. Is this weird to you that scientists around the world were studying what the venoms found in COVID-19 patients while we were being locked down, told to be afraid of something in the air? That scientists were studying the same venoms confirmed by scientists around the world to be the cause of COVID symptoms and death? So let's read this title together. These people during the pandemic, starting in December 2020, when this article was received, they did this during 2020, Alpha conotoxins, cone snail venoms, and alpha cobra toxin promote the proliferation or accelerated growth rate of glioma C6 cells in the brain. All right. Among the brain tumors, glioma is the most common. In general, different biochemical mechanisms involving nicotine receptors and the arachidonic acid cascade are involved in the tumor genesis. Glioma is the most common brain tumor among all brain tumors. What is a glioma? Glioma is a common type of tumor originating in the brain, and about 33% of all brain tumors are gliomas. Oncogenesis means the formation and development of a tumor. I do not like having conversations with scientific papers where the lay audiences can't understand the words. So I'm constantly trying to show you the definition so you can easily understand what they're saying. They're saying that among brain tumors, glioblastomas is the most common, and that nicotine receptors are involved in the development and formation of brain tumors called glioblastomas. Nicotine receptors, which are the target of the spike proteins of COVID, which are also found to be venoms of snakes. Well, I want to show you here that since the COVID-19 vaccines and since COVID was launched, the planned pandemic was launched, articles like this keep popping up over social media. Now, this is Dr. Makis, and I actually know him personally, and he is an incredible man, and he's been attacked all over the media for sharing these stories on social media about young people dying from cancers after getting COVID-19 vaccines or after the COVID-19 vaccine agenda started. Here's an article, Turbo Cancer, Brain Cancer, Glioblastoma in Young People on the Rise. There's 15 cases explored. Look at these girls in the pictures. Athens, Georgia, 21-year-old university student Liza Burke had brain bleed on March 10th of 2023 while on vacation in Mexico, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma on her brainstem and died 4 weeks later on April 28th of 2023. A 21-year-old died within 4 weeks of symptoms of a brain tumor and being diagnosed. In this work, in this study, we studied the effects of nicotine receptor antagonists called marine snail alpha conotoxins and snake venom alpha cobra toxin on the survival and the growth rate of C6 glioma cells in the brain stems of animals. Here's your conotoxins and what a cone snail looks like. Here's what a king cobra looks like. In case you didn't know, that's what creates cobra toxin that scientists are injecting now in these animals during COVID, looking to see if they proliferate these venoms, cause massive growth of brain tumor cells. Proliferation means to grow by rapid production of new parts, cells, buds, or offspring. They're trying to see, does cone snail venoms and snow and cobra venoms, do they grow and create rapid production, turbo cancer tumors? Do they do that? It was found that alpha conotoxins and alpha cobra toxins promoted the accelerated growth rate of C6 glioma cells. While nicotine, they say, this is the summary of the article. Remember, they're going to tell you a lie here. I have to show you the lie. While nicotine had practically no effect at concentrations below 1 microliter per milliliter. Well, in the rest of the whole summary of this paper, which always sits at the top of a research study, they summarize the findings of the study. This is the only mention about nicotine in the whole study, in the summary, sorry. They tell you these venoms caused rapid growth of brain tumor cells, and then they tested nicotine, but it had no effect at a concentration below 1 microliter per milliliter. Now, I have to tell you something. When you've studied enough research studies like I have for the last 30 years, you know that there's always a dose they're studying and another dose they're studying, or they have a placebo they're studying, right? There's always two things they're studying and they're always comparing doses of things. When I read that nicotine had practically no effect at a concentration below 1 microliter per milliliter, I actually sensed that there must have been a concentration above 1 microliter per milliliter of nicotine tested. Why? Because they mentioned the word below. They said nicotine had practically no effect at concentrations below 1 microliter per milliliter. My very first thought when I read this study was, well, why aren't they saying anything about a concentration above that? I got to go look in the study and find out if they actually tested a higher amount than that amount. I mean, they are telling you this amount of nicotine didn't do anything to the tumor, but I was suspicious that they were lying to you and me by hiding truths in the paper. This is inside the paper. Introduction. In many types of cancer, such as lung, breast, and stomach cancer, and a number of others, nicotine receptors are involved in the mechanism of cancer progression. Oh my God. Lung cancers, breast cancers, stomach cancers. Do you know how much chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery expenses are actually given and paid for in America alone for lung cancers, breast cancers, stomach cancers? And did you know that all those cancers are actually involved with nicotine receptors? Are you starting to understand why the FDA is lying to you about nicotine? If they didn't, and the majority of Americans were smoking organic tobacco cigarettes that don't have pyrazines in them, those people would not develop lung cancer, and they wouldn't develop breast cancer, and they wouldn't develop stomach cancer. So they decided to make sure everybody stopped using nicotine products altogether because they wanted you to believe it was addictive so that they could sell chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. All right. So I want to ask you, do you know how prevalent lung cancers, breast cancers, and stomach cancers are in the last several years since COVID? They're telling you nicotine receptors are a part of this. I already showed the world the spike proteins of COVID were king cobra venom, crate snake venom, and then they found 16 different venoms from creatures in the ocean, a starfish called the crown of thorn starfish, and then 15 cone snail venoms, of which now you are seeing during the pandemic, they proved those venom proteins exactly as found in the studies all across the world. Cobra toxin and conotoxins cause cancer. And what are you seeing since COVID and since the injections? I mean, the injections were to make your body make the spike proteins, cobra toxin and bungaro toxin, or they were just injecting it inside of you, inside the spike proteins that were venoms. They were injecting this by billions of them in AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson shots. Snake proteins into your body. They're telling you during the pandemic, they're studying what do those venoms do that were found to be the spike proteins of COVID. They cause cancer, and they bind the nicotine receptors, and it causes aggressive progression of tumor growth. You are seeing turbo cancers because there's venom in all of you people. Medical doctors, pay attention. In many types of cancer, such as lung, nicotine receptors are involved in the mechanism of cancer tumor progression. When you hear about metastatic cancers, nicotine receptors are what those venoms are targeting. All right, so lung cancer. I want to show you this article. Lung cancer is on the rise, and why it's not only a smoker's disease. Did you know as less Americans are smoking, there's actually increased levels of lung cancer being diagnosed? I guess tobacco by itself doesn't cause cancer. And they're telling you right here in this article on Piedmont, lung cancer is on the rise. Why it's not only a smoker's disease. Oh, so people that aren't smoking are now developing lung cancer. When the whole world was just exposed to venoms called spike proteins. They also say in here that there's in many types of cancer, breast cancers, nicotine receptors are involved in the mechanism of cancer progression. And what did the Washington Post just publish in 2023? More young women are getting breast cancer, and they want answers. Well, I just gave it to you. And what about stomach cancers? They say in many types of cancers, including stomach cancer, nicotine receptors are involved in the mechanism of cancer progression. Look at what the Harvard Gazette just published. There's a dramatic rise in cancer in people under 50. And what are they talking about? What kind of cancer? Among the 14 cancer types on the rise that we studied, 8 of the 14 were related to the digestive system, which includes your stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Did you know that all colon cancer, stomach cancer, the progression of those are dependent upon nicotine receptors being targeted? They continue in the study. Gliomas, brain tumors, glioblastomas originating from various brain cells are very malignant and poorly treatable tumors. And the study of the mechanisms of their growth and the search for new methods for treatment is urgently required. They are studying venoms that cause turbocancer glioblastomas, and they're telling you the reason for this study is we're researching to see is there new treatments, because the current treatments we have don't work. They actually say it's urgently required. Would you like to know why this study was so urgently required during COVID? COVID-19 was weaponized venom proteins all around the world that cause, proven in this study, accelerated brain tumors to form. And they needed to know, does nicotine work? Well, I'm going to show you. They said in the summary it didn't do anything below 1 microliter per milliliter. They then go on to say there are 3 types of gliomas, brain tumors. One's called astrocytomas. What is an astrocytoma? Astrocytomas. What are the different types of gliomas? I'm showing you right here. Astrocytomas are glial cell tumors developed from connective tissue cells called astrocytes and are the most common primary brain tumor, accounting for nearly half of all primary brain tumors. Astrocytomas above, emerging in brain from astrocytes, is very difficult to treat because they spread throughout the normal brain tissue and, like other malignant tumors, proliferate rapidly. We tested the effects of nicotine, they said in this study during the pandemic, which is an agonist, something that turns on all nicotine receptors, with the exception of alpha 9 subtype nicotine receptor. Then they continue in the body of the study at concentrations of nicotine 0.001 to 0.1 microliter per milliliter. Nicotine exerted no effect on the aggressive growth rate activity of glioma C6 cells. Well, we're going to continue. Despite these changes, we investigated the effect of nicotine at a concentration of exactly 1 microliter per milliliter. This is more than what they said above. They tried lower than 1 microliter and it had no effect. But despite these changes, we decided, scientists, to investigate the effect of nicotine at a concentration of 1 microliter per milliliter on the growth rate, turbo rate, and viability of glial cells called C6 cells. At this nicotine concentration, inhibition of the proliferation was observed. They saw, when they put this dose of nicotine in these people, it stopped immediately the growth rate of the tumor. And they continue, which after 72 hours of nicotine led to a decrease in the number of tumor cells by more than 2 times. They dissolved half of the brain tumor they created with cone snail venoms and cobra venom. They dissolved half of it in 72 hours with just nicotine at a dose of 1 microliter per milliliter, which is more than what they admitted didn't work in the summary of this paper. This is why you have to read research studies, because they withhold information and lie to you. Can you believe it? They dissolved glioblastomas created by venoms from snakes and cone snails in the ocean. 72 hours it was dissolved. I want to show you what it is they showed with electron microscopes, or actually not electron microscopes. What they discovered with microscopes was the dissolving of the tumor. All right, so on the far left of the screen, you'll see cone snails and king cobras, and their venom is what was used to create the glioblastoma rapidly. So they injected those venoms into these animals, and what you see on the left are 3 images. These are glioblastoma cells. If you look at the top, after 24 hours of injecting cone snail venom and king cobra venom, you'll see how many glioblastoma cells are there. After 48 hours of injecting cone snail venoms and after they injected cobra venom and cone snail venoms, you'll see at 48 hours, there's a lot more of those brain cells. At 72 hours, the whole screen is filled with these brain tumor cells. This is how they said they were able to prove that these venoms cause turbocancers of the brain called glioblastomas. Then they added, as you see in the bottom right, nicotine at concentrations of 1 microliter per milliliter. And this is what happened after 24 hours. Count them up. There's less of these glioblastoma astrocytoma cells or astrocytes than there was before they gave this nicotine. So they gave nicotine 1 microliter per milliliter. And within 24 hours, there were less glioma cells. After 48 hours, there was a whole lot less. Look at 72 hours later. I haven't even added these up, but take the picture on the left, 72 hours after being injected with these venom proteins called spike proteins, and then look at the one on the right. 3 days after nicotine was added, the scientists said the glioblastoma cell counts, the tumor counts, were half the amount after nicotine was added. And I quote again, at this nicotine concentration, inhibition of proliferation was observed, which after 72 hours led to a decrease in the number of cells by more than 2 times. How many people in the world are being told today that if they have a brain tumor of any kind, but a third of them are all glioblastomas. How many of them have been told by their oncologist, their cancer doctor, or their neurosurgeon that they're going to administer nicotine intravenously to dissolve the tumor by half in 72 hours? None of them. Remember, this is the summary at the beginning of the paper. This is why you have to read research studies completely. They said they found alpha conotoxins and alpha cobratoxins promoted accelerated growth of glioblastoma cells, while nicotine had practically no effect at concentrations below 1 microliter. This is the only mention in the summary of the paper about nicotine. How in the world would the scientist watching the remarkable dissolving of the brain tumor with nicotine at another dose, how could they not include that in the summary of this paper? Remember, I said the state has to use all of its powers to repress the truth. Unfortunately, most MDs do not read research studies. They don't have time. They're too busy with their practice. They only look at the summaries at the top of the research studies. So anybody that would have came across this, any medical doctor or oncologist, a cancer specialist who would have read this study, would have only read this abstract, the summary at the top of the paper, and would have seen that, oh, they were testing venoms, and venoms caused cancer growth, tumor growth, like brain tumors. And then they found that the nicotine at this dose had no effect. They would have never known that there actually was a different higher dose of nicotine that was the cure. And they proved it worked. This is the paper. This is in 2020, published in 2021, right in the middle of the pandemic. Alpha cobratoxin. April 2020, French researchers isolate the spike protein gene of COVID-19 virus and publish it's identical to 3 things. Remember, cobratoxin and SARS-CoV-2 spike protein are identical. Why do you think so many turbo cancers are happening in this world? Why? Anyone heard about myocarditis by chance? We're going to get off the brain tumor thing. You're learning why it is the state has to lie to you about nicotine. Anyone heard anything about myocarditis? Did you know there's studies that prove nicotine alone reverses myocarditis? In fact, in 14 days or less, if you give somebody 3 days of nicotine, by day 14, all the scarring and damage to heart cells are completely reversed by nicotine. Oh my God. Where are all of my cardiologists? Well, Peter McCullough and others, I hope all of you are paying attention. I'm very proud of Dr. Peter McCullough, the cardiologist, who published on his Substack the nicotine study I showed with long hauler COVID. Well, I hope they will take a deeper look, all cardiologists, to this study. They took the Coxsackie virus, injected into animals, and caused viral myocarditis. Read the study, dose-dependent protective effect of nicotine. After they created the myocarditis by injecting a virus inside of these animals. I'm going to read you the study. The aim of this study was to investigate the dose-related effects of nicotine. An alpha-7 nicotine receptor agonist turns on nicotine receptors in mouse models of viral myocarditis. Remember, if it happens to a mouse, it happens to you. Nicotine was administered at doses of 0.1, 0.2, or 0.4 milligrams for every 2.2 pounds of body weight, 3 times every day for 7 or 14 consecutive days. The effects of nicotine on survival, myocarditis disease changes of the heart function, and inflammation levels, called cytokine levels, were studied. So they want to know, after we give the nicotine, what's the survival of the animal? How much do we reverse the damage to the heart, called myocarditis? Does the heart's function improve or decrease? And what's the inflammation markers, called cytokines? Check this out. The survival rate on day 14 increased in a dose-dependent fashion with the nicotine. The more nicotine, the better the survival rate, and was markedly higher in the higher dose groups of 0.2 and 0.4 milligrams per kilogram of nicotine than in the infected but untreated groups. Treatment with high-dose nicotine reduced the myocardial inflammation and improved the impaired left ventricle function in infected mice. Cardiologist, how come you haven't known this? Why did they not tell you this? And I'm so glad I came across these studies. I'm convinced the lie is so big because they didn't want you to know. Did you know myocarditis is published? Me and Peter McCullough have been all around the country testifying in state capitol buildings about this crap. Myocarditis was happening in teenagers after the COVID-19 shots came out, and there were studies coming out or references coming out of England by doctors that myocarditis had a 50% mortality rate in 5 years. And all these teenagers were being diagnosed with myocarditis within 7 days of the COVID-19 shots. Did you know nicotine would have cured them? Did you know nicotine improves survival of people with myocarditis, improves cardiac function, left ventricular function, and reduces inflammation? Did y'all know that? I wonder why they lied to you. Check this out in relationship to mRNA vaccines causing myocarditis. The mRNA expressions and protein levels of tumor necrotic factor, the factor that causes cancers and keeps us from developing cancers. Tumor necrotic means it kills cancer tumors. Interleukin 1, interleukin 6, interleukin 17 were significantly downregulated in dose-dependent manners in the nicotine treatment groups compared to the infected, untreated groups. Holy crap, inflammation even turns off with nicotine at these doses. Nicotine dose-dependently, the higher the nicotine, the better, reduce the severity of viral myocarditis through inhibiting the production of pro-inflammatory markers. And then they show you A, B, C, and D. If you look at these dissected pieces, biopsy pieces of muscle from the hearts of these animals, the purple, deep purple little dots you'll see in collections, you'll see them on the screen, A, B, C, and D. These are different tissue samples. And the purple is the damaged cardiomyocytes and the myocarditis. The bottom right one, D, has less of the purple than any of the other tissue samples. That was the one with the highest amounts of nicotine. If you know someone who has been diagnosed with myocarditis, ask your cardiologist if nicotine patches are right for you. Then show them this study. Did you know that rabies virus, I mentioned earlier in this presentation, that the spike protein of rabies virus is snake venom proteins, just like COVID's was, supposedly. The virus. Supposed virus. And in this study, this was published in, actually, I don't know the date. In this study, interactions between the rabies virus and nicotine receptors were studied. Did you know that rabies virus, the highlight of the study reads, rabies virus's spike protein called a glycoprotein binds to nicotinic acetylcholine receptors? Did you know nicotine and genetic deletion of alpha-7 nicotine receptors modulate rabies' disease aggression? Did you know nicotine stops rabies disease processes in the body of an animal and a human? Has your veterinarian ever told you your dog that got bit by a rabid dog, all they need to do was shave his hair, fur, and a little spot and put on a nicotine patch to save his life? Or did they tell you you needed a vaccine? Anybody who had a bat in their house. I actually had a patient one time who spent the night in a house of a friend, and a bat was found in their attic. And this teenage girl was told she couldn't even go to school without getting multiple rabies vaccines for several months. They did not recommend nicotine patches or nicotine gum to these people. How come the medical doctors don't know that nicotine stops the disease process of rabies? How many rabies vaccines are given to dogs and cats? And how come they're not injected with nicotine routinely? Did you know that HIV has a spike protein that actually does the same thing? It targets nicotine receptors. And did you know nicotine protects you from having HIV and AIDS or worse progression with AIDS? This study by the NIH on the NIH's website, 2004, glantamine and nicotine have a synergistic effect on blocking microglial cells in the brain activation induced by HIV's one spike protein called GP120, which also is a snake venom protein. Abstract. This is what they are studying here. HIV and nicotine. Chronic brain inflammation is the common final pathway in the majority of neurodegenerative brain diseases, and central to this phenomenon is the immune system's activation of brain mononuclear phagocyte cells called microglia. This inflammatory mechanism is a central component of HIV-associated dementia, abbreviated HAD. Further, this activation, as measured by tumor necrotic factor alpha and nitric oxide release, is synergistically attenuated or stopped through the alpha-7 nicotine receptor system by pre-treatment with nicotine. They can stop this neurodegeneration in HIV patients with nicotine beforehand. Our findings suggest a novel therapeutic combination to treat or prevent the onset of dementia in HIV patients through the modulation of the microglial inflammatory mechanisms with nicotine. Have you ever been told that nicotine can stop or halt the progression of HIV or rabies? If science has proven massive health benefits from nicotine and it was found to be an antidote to the most recent pandemic, I want to ask you, Why are all these countries right now doing this? CNN Health reported June 2022, Joe Biden's administration moves to restrict nicotine levels in tobacco products. Holy crap. Our president of the United States is going to reduce the amount of loud nicotine only in tobacco products. I just showed you pyrazines are what cause nicotine addiction. Why would Joe Biden's administration go after nicotine? By the way, this paper on CNN Health, this article, came out 2 months after my Watch the Water documentary came out, where I listed at the top, nicotine was the perfect antidote all along. Ask me if I think that's ironic. Nope. I think they had to get ahead of this. Millions of people viewing that information and then finding out it worked. Here, let's read what the CNN's reporting. The Biden administration signaled Tuesday that it will develop a proposed rule to establish a maximum nicotine level in cigarettes and other tobacco products that will essentially lower the amount of nicotine in products available in the U.S. It is a step that no other administration has taken before, and as one public health expert say, would be transformative if enacted. Addiction to nicotine in combusted products is the main driver of sustained use of these products. Well, that's false. We've already shown you that. They're lying to you. Nicotine is powerfully addictive, FDA Commissioner Dr. Robert Califf said in the statement. There's another liar for you. Remember, the state had to repress with all of its power the truth from getting out, and Dr. Ardis and Stu Peters and Mike Adams and Vanderstilt and Scott McKay all told you in the same day in early 2022, April 2022, that nicotine was the antidote to COVID-19. And just a few months later, the entire government of the United States, the president of the United States, the FDA's CEO and commissioner is now coming out telling you once again, nicotine is powerfully addictive. Give me a break. Then in 2023, the UK, look at this press release. Government drive to phase out smoking and tackle youth vaping attracts large response. Over 12,000 responses so far submitted on the government proposals to create first smoke-free generation, less than halfway through the consultation period. The King's speech included historical bill to ban the sale of all tobacco products to anyone born on or after the 1st of January 2009 forever, creating a better and brighter future for our children. The Guardian reported right now that New Zealand passes the world's first tobacco law to ban smoking for next generation. This is, if you look at the bottom left-hand side, this is December of 2022, just a few months after Joe Biden's administration says they're going to lower the amount of nicotine. It continues in The Guardian. New Zealand is believed to be the first country in the world to implement the annually rising smoking age allowed, ensuring tobacco cannot be sold to anyone born on or after the 1st of January 2009. And then what did England do the next year? Adopted the same policy. What did government of Canada say? The government of Canada seeks input to further reduce tobacco use. And this is September of 2023, just after the UK. England said they were going to do this also. Read the highlighted blue section. The government of Canada is committed to reducing the number of people in Canada who smoke cigarettes and use other tobacco products to less than 5% of the population by 2035. Oh my gosh, why the assault on tobacco? Australia, the BBC reports in May of 2023 also, why Australia decided to quit its vaping habit. Did you know, right after my Watch the Water documentary came out, telling you all that nicotine is the cure for COVID, did you know that Australia started banning imports of vaping products that have higher amounts of nicotine than cigarettes do? Earlier this month, it is reported in this article about Australia. Earlier this month, the government decided enough is enough and introduced a range of new restrictions. Despite vapes already being illegal for many, under new legislation, they will become available by prescriptions only. Do you see what the government's doing? Remember, they're going to shield you from the economical consequences of their lie. So instead of you now being able to go to a store in Australia and buy vaping products without a prescription, they want to prescribe it to you as a drug. It thus becomes vitally important, Joseph Goebbels says, for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie. If the truth about nicotine's health benefits were to get out, consider how many industries would be affected and how that would affect the state negatively. Only then do you understand the magnitude of the repeated lie. Are you ready for some more truth bombs? Did you know in 2023, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was awarded to Katalin Kariko and Drew Weissman at the University of Pennsylvania for creating the COVID-19 vaccines? Did you know that in 2011, these two were being paid by the United States government to do mRNA gene therapy vaccine production and creation? Here's one of their studies. And it writes here in their study, they plainly say RNA containing pseudouridine, that little symbol, was cleaved or cut efficiently by RNase A, RNase H, RNase T1, RNase T2, nuclease P1, and snake venom phosphodiesterase. Although there's some indication that pancreatic diesterase and snake venom phosphodiesterase may cleave pseudouridine RNA with reduced efficiency. They have snake venom in the COVID-19 shots. I want to show you this. Who's funding these papers? It states here at the bottom of the page, conflict of interest statement. KK, as Katalin Kariko and Drew Weissman, have formed a small biotech company called RNARX that receives funding from the NIH to explore the use of modified mRNA for gene therapy. It's 2011. When I looked up snake venom phosphodiesterase, like where would these scientists at the University of Pennsylvania that just won the Nobel Prize for creating these snake venom laced vaccines, where would they have gotten snake venom phosphodiesterase to use to make their vaccines? I know they're not milking snakes. Well, there's companies that sell snake venom derived phosphodiesterase. And here's an example: Innovative Research. On the product purchase page, there's a paragraph that tells the researchers what you can and cannot do with the venom that's in the COVID shots. It says it's inhibited or destroyed by reducing agents such as glutathione, cysteine, and ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C. And it's completely destroyed by EDTA. Completely destroyed by EDTA, snake venom phosphodiesterase. Well, EDTA is at thedrardisshow.com. I said this is actually who is sponsoring this show is going to be my EDTA product. I want to show you here my recommendations for all people who've gotten the COVID-19 vaccines, because snake venom phosphodiesterase is referenced in the people that just won the Nobel Prize as being a part of the recipe to create their actual products. EDTA, liquid EDTA, 1 milliliter twice daily is what we recommend. First thing in the morning, and don't take any minerals until 2 hours later. Glutathione at 1,000 milligrams every day. Vitamin C for 2,000 to 5,000 milligrams per day, split up throughout the day. And then N-acetylcysteine, 2,000 milligrams every day. That's a cysteine product. It's all the four things they reference destroys snake venom phosphodiesterase. You can get EDTA at the Dr. Ardis Show. You can get vitamin C at the Dr. Ardis Show. You can get N-acetylcysteine at the Dr. Ardis Show. Glutathione I do not carry, but many companies do make that. As far as EDTA and COVID, outside of nicotine beating COVID, did you know that it is reported and studied and published by October of 2020? This article, titled "Why the Lower Reported Prevalence of Asthma in Patients Are Diagnosed with COVID-19," validates asthma sufferers were not getting COVID. Asthma patients weren't getting COVID. Validates repurposing EDTA solutions to prevent and manage and treat COVID-19 disease. Now, before I dive into this, I just need to remember the spike proteins of COVID were found to be snake venom proteins. The two people that just won the Nobel Prize are referencing they're using snake venom in their creation of the vaccines for COVID. In 2020, asthma sufferers were found to be immune to COVID, just like smokers. And scientists that did this study wanted to know what was protecting them from getting COVID. And they found out what it was. Remember, EDTA is published to beat the snake venom component in these shots, from what I just showed you. In this study in 2020, they wrote, asthma is considered a high medical risk factor for susceptibility to SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 infection. Yet, asthma is not on the list of top 10 chronic health problems suffered by people who died from COVID. The COVID-19 virus's fusion process employs a calcium-dependent site on every cell, recently discovered for rubella and later described for SARS-CoV-1. Thus, the calcium-dependent requirement for the fusion loop FL process may explain both the increased lethal action of beta coronaviruses like SARS-CoV-2 and the apparent resistance of asthma patients to SARS-CoV-2 infection due to inhaling their medications that contain EDTA. EDTA destroys completely snake venom components. Additionally, intravenous EDTA chelation has been safely used for more than 50 years if you don't want to use my oral version. And this here on the screen, I'm not going to go through it. This is how a pharmacist can use EDTA to produce a compound drug to help cure people of COVID-19 using EDTA as an inhaler. This is how a compound pharmacist, this is the directions of how to make EDTA inhalers to beat COVID, prevent COVID. This is our EDTA at our site. Here's your venom solutions on the screen. I have listed nicotine agents, 7 milligram patches or 2 milligram gums, acetylcholine, which is citicoline or CDP choline. Ashwagandha destroys venom proteins, otherwise known as Withania somnifera, and ashwagandha can be purchased at all kinds of companies, supplement companies' websites. Licorice root destroys venom. Quercetin destroys venom. Mucuna prurines destroys venom. Cinnamon destroys venom. EDTA completely obliterates venom. Nano gold destroys venom's toxicity. 6% food grade hydrogen peroxide destroys venom. And then there are binders to venoms that help detox them out of the body. They include apopectin powder and food grade bentonite clay. And we're researching right now ozonated activated charcoal, and it appears to be working. On the screen, you will see highlighted in white. See all the things in white? Acetylcholine, licorice root, quercetin, mucuna prurine, cinnamon cassia, EDTA, nanogold, and apopectin powder. Of the things in white, apopectin powder and EDTA are their own products at the drardisshow.com, which is why I released these during COVID. All the other white products are found in one product I got Dr. Ed Group and Global Healing to make for audiences around the world, and it is called Foreign Protein Cleanse. All of the things in white, acetylcholine, licorice root, quercetin, mucuna prurine, cinnamon cassia, and nanogold are inside our product Foreign Protein Cleanse. And you can get that at the drardisshow.com. I believe everybody on the planet should be consuming 2 dropperfuls of this every single day from here until the end of time. It's called Foreign Protein Cleanse because all viruses and venoms are foreign proteins that don't belong in the human body. All viruses, doesn't matter what they are, flu, cold, rubella, measles, they're all foreign proteins. This combination, we have full faith, will actually neutralize and destroy all of them and help you eliminate them from your body and keep you safe. All right, now you'll see it here on the label on the far right, you'll see all the ingredients inside of it. Lobelia is the first thing listed. Lobelia is called Indian tobacco. Inside that plant is a nutrient called lobeline. Lobeline has the exact same actions as nicotine. So we were able to produce this product with a component found in nature that mimics another nutrient in nature and in plants called nicotine. That's why it's in here. While they're trying to assault nicotine, destroy nicotine, get you to stop using nicotine and get nicotine out of your ability to purchase in all these countries, they're trying to do that right now. All these countries around the world, why are they trying to destroy nicotine's access and ability to access tobacco products? We know that there's substances in nature that mimic the exact same action, and that's why they're in there. And you'll see the last ingredient is nanogold. Nanogold, by the way, enhances plants' ability to destroy king cobra venom in the body of animals and humans, and that's been proven over and over and over. Gold magnifies the life-saving effects and benefits of all plants that neutralize venom. And you see the list of them in there. Apopectin powder is also there. So this is a QR code you can scan. This takes you to the actual site. I obviously didn't have an apopectin picture here for that last slide. But if you scan this QR code, it takes you back to a section of the drardisshow.com called Patient Resources, and you can download all my PowerPoint presentations for free. You have been lied to. You're going to continue to be lied to, and this is why I created and formed a group called Healing for the Ages Conferences. If you go to healingfortheages.com, scan that QR code, you can get $50 off, or actually, I think it's $50 off of our previous presentations from last September, where we go through a lot of the stuff I just presented. This was just nicotine. We went through all kinds of topics of how they're trying to poison us and hurt us, and then how to keep you safe and healthy and your family healthy. You can use the promo code Ardis at healingfortheages.com to save money on that presentation and all of its post recordings. In September of 2024 is going to be our Healing for the Ages 2.0. If you go to healingfortheages.com, you'll see a calendar of all of our free events, our virtual events, each month leading up to our conferences. That is the end of our presentation. I just want you to know how much I love you and appreciate you. The world has been lied to about nicotine. I did not create nicotine. Tobacco giants did not create nicotine. God created nicotine when he created the plants that he put on this earth. Or if you don't believe in God, Mother Nature created plants with these nutrients in it. And only science and men are telling you not to trust the nutrients God or Mother Nature put in the plants. Did you just, I hope you can grasp the gravity of the lie since 1994 that nicotine is an addictive chemical. It is not what is responsible for the addictive nature of tobacco products. I just showed you what is. I'm Dr. Ardis. God bless you. Ask your doctor, no matter what condition you have, is nicotine right for you? And if all the conditions I just showed you, if any of you are seeking help from medical professionals with those conditions, and you ask them, would nicotine be right for me? And they say, oh no, nicotine would be bad for you. You need to give them a copy or a link to this presentation, or print out the whole PDF presentation. It's 380 something slides. Don't print it out. It's going to be a lot of ink. But give them the link, forward it to them by email, and share this with the whole world. You're all being lied to, and governments around the world are working and putting in place actions to take your ability to access the highest nicotine-containing plant on the earth away from you. Tobacco. I'm Dr. Ardis. Truth always wins. Nature always wins. God bless you.